Yes, sir.
Okay, it's 8 o'clock. We'll call the regular board meeting of the Public Utility District to order. Peter, if you would do the roll call.
Rickard, here. Epstein, here. Smith,
Here.
Norberg here, and O'Grady. Here. We got the full team.
Good. Announcements? Eric?
Just the usual announcement. I'd like to welcome everybody to the Kirkwood Meadows Public Utility District regular board meeting. It's being live fed over the internet, and anyone can email me questions at echristison, that's echrist.eson, at kmpud.com.
Great. Any corrections to the agenda or consent calendar? There being none, we'll move on to item 5, comments from the audience. Bertrand?
I decided to run for a KMPUD board seat to be a Kirkwood community advocate. The KMPUD has a special responsibility toward Kirkwood community. Indeed, it administers tax allocation received by Alpine and Amador counties, and maybe in the future by El Dorado County. Recently, here are 2 events where KMPUD can/could have helped the community. CAL FIRE did 300 home inspections at the end of September, resulting in numerous notice violations. Instead of dismantling the chipper on September 30th as scheduled, KMPUD should have extended by a few weeks the clipping program and set up a dumpster for the wind material. That would be one way to help the community deal with this unforeseen event. The other topic I'd like to talk about is, I think I can say that the Kirkwood community was not happy that El Dorado National Forest did a prescribed fire at the peak of the fire season, which ended up in a wildfire when predictable Santa Ana winds kicked in like they do usually in October. So I think the KMPUD board should send a letter to the Forest Service to protest such and ask that our community not to be exposed to unnecessary risk like they did last month, October. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, can I comment?
Sure.
I concur with what Bertrand has said. I felt it was pretty reckless on the part of the Forest Service to do a controlled burn when the red flag warnings were out and PG&E was already
has left the conference.
Forecasting, dangerous conditions. I would prefer to see them do these burns in the springtime when the ground is wet, rather than in the fall when it's dangerous. You've got a comment?
Yes, sir. Jeff Brown, Amador County Supervisor. When they started the fire, it was 50% humidity, and all their 3/4 of an inch book of prep said that they could start the fire, which is what allowed them to do. They started doing back burning when they found out that they were going to go into a red flag situation. The red flag came in quicker than they expected and then overran them.
Well, I still think it was reckless on their part. So, especially when you consider how inaccessible that canyon is.
Yes.
The problem is that canyon hasn't burned in over 100 years, so the amount of fuel load that has been down in there, they've been waiting to burn that area for multiple years. They were only supposed to, this is a 10-year project that they've been working on. Going out and doing it in the springtime, the fuel load is actually too wet to burn. So they still, as you know, you still have snow around here. You still have a lot of snow, and it isn't until you get into the fire season. A lot of times, the summer, when it's dry up here, when you can't do that. I think you ought to have Rick Hobson come up and explain to the board what happened.
I think if you lived in Kirkwood, you might view it differently.
Yeah.
That fire was within 2 miles of us.
I was up here every morning on that fire, watching it, and taking care of it. I'm looking at it.
Jeff, I can make a suggestion, please, because this is not an agenda item, but the Forest Service did review their plans with us before they started any of this, and their time for comments. I think it'd be reasonable to ask them if they could come back and give us an update, and that time we could ask questions and hear directly from them and express our concerns.
Is that the consensus of the board?
Sounds good to me.
Eric, if you will arrange that with Rick, that would be great. Any other comments from the audience? Very good. We'll move on to adoption of the consent calendar. We have 4 items. Approve the special board meeting minutes of August 30, 2019. Approve the emergency board meeting minutes August 30. Approve current consent for claims and review receivable shutoffs report. Do I hear a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I move we approve the consent calendar.
I'll second it.
Seconded by Standish. All in favor?
Aye.
We will go with item 8, and the first item will be the fiscal year 2018-2019 audit. I believe we have Olga on the line here.
Yes, good morning,
Yes,
everyone.
Good morning.
All right. I'm going to just go ahead and jump into my presentation. Do we have it on the screen as well?
We do.
Okay, perfect, Kelly. I'll let you drive then. Okay. The first slide is a letter to the board and management, and we just wanted to thank you, the board and management, for continuing engagement of Moss Adams for performing the financial audit services. More so, huge thank you to the staff at the district who has to put up with our audit team for a couple of weeks on site and a couple of months off site, working diligently, responding to all of our questions and inquiries and requests for information and requests for support. Audits are never easy, and we do a very good job in diving into a lot of detail, and staff is always very responsive and very helpful in getting us everything done timely. So I just wanted to say a huge thank you to everyone at the district who has to deal with our team and help us get the audit done quickly and timely. With that, we did complete our audit work back in August and finished up all of the wrap-up in September. Based on our audits, going to the next slide, Kelly, for the audit opinions, we will be issuing the clean audit opinions on the financial statements of the district, as well as a clean internal control report on internal controls that's required by governmental auditing standards. In addition to those 2 reports, we'll issue a letter to RUS, which is a specific letter that RUS requires on particular points for compliance requirements that they instill. So all clean reports, so all good news. That will be actually today's date if the board approves the draft financial statements. So that date will change, but otherwise, no changes to the report. Going on to the next slide, of course, our responsibilities under auditing standards is to issue an audit opinion based on the work that we perform on financial information that's provided by management. Management should and does take full responsibility for that financial information. We just perform our audit procedures on the information we receive, as well as looking at, as I mentioned earlier, internal control processes at the district. So these are internal controls surrounding the business and financial cycles. So revenue cycle, cash receipts, cash disbursements, payroll, financial reporting, and so forth. So we take a deep dive into what those processes are and whether there's any potential weaknesses. And based on the results of our audit, we're required to provide certain communications to those charged with governance or the board, those communications that we think are important for you to understand and carry out your fiduciary responsibilities with respect to financial reporting. So going on to the next slide, required audit communications. I have just a few bullet points in the next couple of slides to communicate to you, and feel free to jump in with any questions if you have, if anything comes up. So we start planning our we talked to board members, just trying to risk assess really. What are some of the risky areas that we need to pay special attention during the audit? What are some of the significant transactions? What are some of the accounting pronouncements that will be impacting the district? So based on that planning stage, we carry out our audit procedures, and if we did a good job, we don't have to modify the scope of the audit or have any surprises as we're carrying out the audit procedures, which we didn't have any surprise procedures. There was no surprises during the audit. We carried out everything as planned. I'll point out a couple of new accounting pronouncements that impacted financial statements that make them look different this year as compared to prior year. So with respect to significant accounting policies, those didn't change. There was one particular new auditing standard that became effective actually in 2018, but was implemented by the district in 2019, and that's GASB 75 for other post-employment benefits. You all probably remember well GASB 68, which was the pension standard that required to put the entire pension liability on the financial statements of the district. Well, this is a very similar standard and pertains to health and other benefits that are provided to retirees. The way the benefit is calculated is you look at the benefit that will be that current employees are eligible for, and as they're providing their service to the district, they're earning those benefits. So once again, there's an actuarial study that's done to determine what that future benefit the employees are entitled to, and what is that liability that district has to report in their books. Based on that actuarial study, it was determined that there was 1.1 roughly million of a liability that should have been recorded as of the beginning of the year, and I think it changed slightly to 1.2 million at the end of the year. But that's an additional, once again, additional liability. Fits in nicely on the balance sheet, just like under the pension liability. But you will see that it's quite larger. It's 1.3 at the end of 2019, 1.3 million. So once again, the beginning net position had to be adjusted for 1.1 million, and we have a good description of footnote 6 of that transaction. Questions on that? Okay. Another new item in the financial statements you will see is that the capital assets now include an intangible asset of $15.2 million, and that is for amounts paid to PGE for the transferring the intangible asset, the right to use the line, and making a payment for future maintenance expenses. So that was all capitalized and reported as an intangible asset. So just the reclassification and of the previously owned asset, as well as the additional payment, was recorded as intangible. So you will see that in a footnote 3 in detail. On the accounting estimates, those are very common. We've talked about many times. So depreciable life of various capital assets, various accruals, and pension post-employment benefits. Those are primary areas where management estimates are employed in the financial statements. We did identify one significant deficiency in internal control, and this is like one-off type of an item. I mentioned that GASB 75 was effective in 2018, and it should have been implemented in 2018. At the time, management did an assessment and determined that there were very few retirees actually in the plan, and the actuarial evaluation wasn't done. So the determination was that the liability is probably immaterial. At that time, we suggested that the full actuarial study should actually be done just to determine that actual amount. And so for that reason, because the timing of the implementation of the new standard is off by 1 year, we have to issue a significant deficiency. All right, moving on to the next slide. As far as we know, management didn't consult with any other accountants or independent auditors. We didn't have any disagreements with management during the audit. As I mentioned, we have a very collaborative kind of conversation going on with Kelly and Eric during audit, but nothing that we would consider a disagreement. District is exposed to various claims and legal proceedings just in the normal course of business. There was nothing in particular that needed to be highlighted in the footnotes to the financial statements. So it's just a standard exposure. On the next slide, audit adjustments and past audit adjustments. We didn't have any audit adjustments, which is once again is very good news. The records, financial records that we were presented to be audited did not have to be modified is what it means. And that's very good considering the amount of transactions and the activity and the complexity of your district. So we did have a couple of proposed adjustments during the audit that didn't get reflected in the financial statements. They're more or less of a reclassification nature related to AR classification, accounts receivable. And we consider them immaterial for the purposes of the audit and the financial statements. So they got corrected in 2020. All right. On the last slide, I have a few, just a couple of highlights of the new accounting standards. GASB in general has been very, 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 very active in issuing new standards, and they're more complex as they're issuing those standards. So we'll continue working with Kelly and the team to assess the impact of those future standards. GASB 84 will be effective for fiscal year 2020, so coming up here next year, or this year. And GASB 87 is the leasing standard for 2021. So just heads up on those two. There will be potentially additional changes to the financial statements as we're going forward. And that completes my presentation. Once again, huge thank you to the district staff for all their help and cooperation during the audit. Any questions?
Olga, this is Standish O'Grady. I have a question on GASB 75 and the 1.3 million newfound liability. Is that a real liability in the sense that we might have to pay it out, and when and or what conditions would require us to pay it out?
Sure. So the OPEB plan you have is part of the California and the CalPERS plan, right? So it's very similar to the pension plan. It is a real liability, but it's stretched out over a long period of time. It's unlikely that you would be having to pay it in all at once in any particular year. It's something that employees are earning over time and will be paid over time. So just like now, your retirees, I think there's 2 of them are receiving payments. That's the real cash outflow during the year, as well as some contributions to the plan, but nearly not as big in dollar amount as the liability itself. So it is a very long-term liability, and will continue to change from year to year as your, the active employees change. If there's any potential benefits changes in the future, that could change as well. So there's some flexibility with that number.
Olga, this is Bob Epstein. I just have a question about the format. I'm assuming the formatting that you're used in terms of how you classify things and where you display them is something that's predetermined, that you don't have a lot of control over. Is that right?
Well, yes.
So let me give you the reason why I asked the question. So it's just, if somebody who wasn't familiar with the district read this, and they read page 37, they would see that we had $8 million in operating revenues and $9.8 million in expenses. So it looks like we lost $1 million. I think there's 2 differences. One is that property tax isn't accounted for in that paragraph. I assume that's the big discrepancy. Is that correct?
Are you looking at page 37?
Page 37, the paragraph. And it's just an example, and I'm really just trying to figure out how we can make these things easier for someone to understand. So the last paragraph of page 37, next to the last paragraph, to the untrained eye, it looks like bad management.
Sorry, I have a printed document in front of me, and page 37 is OPEB footnotes, so I'm sorry.
It says total operating revenues It says total operating revenues are 8.8 million, total operating expenses were 9.8 million. So that implies we're running at $1 million loss. You could interpret that from those two paragraphs. And that isn't the case. Oh, I'm sorry, it's page 37 of our board book. That's the reason why it's a problem. I don't see page numbers on your report.
Kelly, are you able to see what it is in the financial statements? I just want to make sure I'm looking at the same thing.
I would have to.
It's the page titled District Highlights.
The last two paragraphs.
Looks like page 9.
Is it in management discussion and analysis? Is that what it is at the top? Yes, that's what it is. Okay.
I end up with page 6, I think, if I'm counting right.
It's a statement of net position.
I guess
It's page. I don't have the just the single audit
Yeah,
file.
page number
in front
5
of me.
of the report.
I count the 6th page.
The 6th page.
Yeah, the top of the page says district highlights, then statement of position, and then there's 2 paragraphs at the bottom.
I see. Okay, I'm with you now.
Okay. I'm sorry for that numbering confusion.
Right, I see what you're saying. The interesting thing on the management discussion analysis, so these highlights could actually be changed up, and there is some flexibility in this, because this is more of a management describing activities that happened during the audit year in a that impact financial statements. So that could be reworded and described in a different way.
Okay.
So we can, I can work with Kelly and Eric to see if we want to
And
change
I'm
that
not
up.
suggesting
that
that.
particular discussion is flexible, but
Okay.
I see what you're saying.
All right. So given the fact that it's that we're late because we missed the last board meeting, I'm not really trying to create new work for this year. I'm just suggesting that in this overview section, if there's the possibility of doing it, that it not this could create a misleading impression. The other thing is the 8.8 million in revenue. I couldn't find any place where that adds the 8.8 million.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is the closest I could find was a revenue statement that added to less than that, but I think it excludes things because I think it said proprietary operations or something like that. So it's just a question of maybe for next year. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
We'll make a note for next year. I think we've had discussions with both Kelly and Eric to improving the MD&A in general and maybe put in a little bit more meat in there. But I can certainly understand. What we're not flexible on is the presentation of the financials themselves, because you have governmental funds and you have proprietary funds.
And that's fine.
How you display those in the financial statements is different, and the requirements are different. And I think that's the reason it's very hard to trace the amounts that are being referenced at a very high level in the MD&A. But I'll make a note of that, and we can certainly rework the MD&A next year.
Okay, so maybe while it's fresh in our minds, you try to figure out how would we like to see it presented so that it's just a little easier to follow. But I'm not suggesting more work for this year. Okay.
Yeah, so, Olga, this is Eric. Rickard. I had the exact same question when we reviewed this in our October Finance Committee meeting. And I believe you do need to present things in a certain way, but it's not the way we see it. That's the and what Kelly said. Well, all that is in the appendix. The financial statements that we see. So, for example, my understanding is that we had a net loss of about $400,000 last year, and our budget for this year is somewhat similar. This is after everything, all the GASB stuff is incorporated and all the depreciation and amortization, all those non-cash items are included. So, at the end of the year, as Standish, our treasurer, has said, great year. And then when I read the audit, it's whoa, not a great year. But I know that it is. I mean, I know that it was. It's just that somehow something is displayed differently. And to be honest, I just can't it's hard to understand. I'm used to seeing the statements the way Kelly presents them. We get the complete set of financial statements every month. And I think that they are completely accurate, except for maybe these couple things that you uncovered during the audit. So that's,
Okay.
That was my reaction to it. It's that I don't think it's inaccurate. I just think that it's cast in a certain way for some reasons that I don't understand, that don't really reflect the reality that we understand.
Sure. And what we could do, if that would be helpful, at the end of the audit, we could sit down with you, or even at the board meeting or finance committee meeting, and take your internal financials as of the end of September or June, and the audited financials, and draw some parallels as to why it's so much different. And I could highlight some of those areas to help you kind of show what's causing those differences. Because I understand you're using management reports primarily, so you're very familiar with those. But then we can, I can show how things change when they get into the audited format financials.
So my bottom line question is, from what you've reported to us today, is that you think that that our records are good, that the way we're expressing our finances is solid, except for that one GASB thing.
Yes.
And that what Kelly is presenting to us each month is giving the board and the public an accurate picture of things. And as long as I understand that you agree with that, then I'm comfortable. I just want to be sure that that's the case.
It is accurate. It's a different presentation because the management reports do not often and do not have to match the audited or externally reported financials. There's a lot more information and detail in those that helps you make management and board decisions. So, but yes, those are accurate, and just the way they're translated into audited is a little bit different.
Thank you.
I think your suggestion, Olga, of helping us reconcile management reports with the audited reports would be a good one. Is a good one, and I think we should do that next year. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the two big drivers of the difference and/or our confusion are, one, that you have to separate government funds from proprietary funds, and two, the mega trend of CalPERS pushing its unfunded deficiency or liability on to its customers. I mean, that's what GASB 68 is, and that's what GASB 75 is, aren't they?
That is correct, yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and that's, a while back we had a mini kind of a session about how those liabilities get reported. And you may remember it's not just the liability. There is impacts of that calculation of that standard that also become deferred outflows, deferred inflows. So there's other, GASB terms in the financial statements that you probably don't have on your internal ones. And they're all non-cash type items, but they do, they do add up to a little bit of a different number than audited financial statements. And I think that's what's causing the differences that you guys are seeing. So we can do that again next year, and I can highlight all of the GASB 68 and GASB 75 related items that are spread out in the financial statements that are non-cash items that would be different from your monthly management report. And that would hopefully be very apparent where those are having impact. It's just it's hard to show them in one place because they're, like I said, they're kind of spread out in different places in the financials. But that is correct. Yes, the governmental funds are reported differently, and the pension and OPEB liabilities and related items are also included in the financial statements that are different from your internal management report.
And just for my fellow board members' benefit, our GASB 68 liability went down this year. And it went down because we were in a roaring stock market. So CalPERS's assets are good. And the first time that the stock market heads south, that liability will increase probably dramatically. Now it'll take a while because there's a couple of year lag factor.
That is correct, exactly. That liability will fluctuate on how the markets are doing, how the investments are doing, if there's any changes to the experience from the actuarial assumptions, any changes to benefits and things like that. So there's a lot of things that go into the actuarial assumption of determining that liability. But you're right, this year in particular, it's different because of the stock market and the investment returns on the investments.
Very good. Any more questions of Olga?
Thank you for a great report and a great job, Kelly and Olga.
Thank you, everyone.
Any questions?
Thank
from
you,
the
Olga.
audience? Jeff, did you want to see if the audience had
I'm going to drop
Right.
off and you have
Hang
the
on for
rest
1
of the
second,
meeting.
please.
Yeah, just a moment, please. Any comments from the audience? We have no questions from the audience, so thank you very much, Olga.
I have one
Oh, wait.
one time. So that problem between the business and the actual number that we work with and the audit is a perennial problem because last year it was exactly the same, almost the same. So yes, it really needs to be investigated and find out why we have these perennial differences.
Very good. That was more in the way of a comment than a question, so thank you very much, Olga.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Are you looking for a motion to approve the audit, or is that not necessary?
I believe we do need a motion to approve the audit.
think you can just hang up,
To
yeah.
this meeting, your letter.
So moved. I motion that we approve the 2018-19 audit.
Second that motion.
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Very good. With that, we'll move on to current reports. Kelly, finances for August and September and October?
The August statements are just for informational purposes, and somehow they got entered into the packet twice. So you'll see in your packet the August financials are in there twice for some reason.
Oh, it wasn't me.
No, it wasn't you.
I just read this.
But
That explains the 450.
yeah, it's all my fault. So we'll start with the September balance sheet on page 123 of your packet. So you'll notice total operating cash is up from plan by about $440,000, and it's mainly just due to the timing of payments for the big projects that we had planned, like the wastewater treatment plant roof and the T1 line. Once we get invoices for those things and get them paid, we'll probably come back more into line and still doing better than budget, but not such a big, huge difference. Is there any questions on the balance sheet? No. Okay. Moving on to the revenue or operating cash by fund. I apologize for not annotating which funds are which this month. I will definitely do it next month. But Fund 1 in the negative, that is Fire Department, G&A, and Parks. And that just, it runs at a negative until the end of the year once we have all of our property taxes received. You'll also notice that Fund 40, which is employee housing, is at a negative, and that's mainly due to the purchase of the 2 condo units, the escrows for both of those units. And you'll also notice that Fund 70, which is snow removal, is in the negative, and that is just due to the fact of the timing of when we receive our payments for snow removal contracts. So that will come back positive going into October, November, December. Any questions on the operating cash by fund? Fund 1 is G&A and parks and fire. So that's our governmental fund, is Fund 1.
Does it bother you that we're $1 million, $1.1 million down? Variance to budget?
Oh no, that's for the whole. That $900,000 is actually, if you go to the bottom there, Standish, we're actually $405,000 up from plan. That's just where that budget number lives in our financial statements. So we normally don't look at this. You know, we look at it as the whole number on the front check. This is just like a drill down, and that's where that, when I upload the budget, it just all gets uploaded into the one fund. Okay, moving on then to the combined income statement. You'll notice that operating revenues year to date are up from plan by $159,000. That again does include the grant money that we received for the fire department. I believe it was about $65,000 that we received. And year to date total operating is up from plan by $391,000. Moving on to the general fund on page 127. Sure.
Positive 391, it's partly due to not having all the invoices paid for these projects. Yeah.
A lot of it has to do with just timing of projects being completed.
Yeah, we have a $250,000 invoice coming for the roof this month.
How much?
$250,000.
Question about your cost of sales.
Sure.
Revenues are up, cost of sales is down. So is that an expected trend against budget?
It has to do with the price of propane and the price of our purchase power. I budgeted for a certain price, and the daily market on the purchase power fluctuates, as does the price of propane. So it just has to do with what I assumed the prices were going to be and what they actually came out to be. Mm-hmm.
Plus, if PG&E shuts off the power for millions of people, there's a surplus. Might cause a price drop for the rest of us.
Wish it was like that.
Okay, moving on to G&A on page 127. You'll notice that there is a large variance in contract services, and that's just due to the timing of the receipt of the final bill from Moss Adams. It came to us at the end of October, so that will get posted in the October statements, and that'll come into line. And then also you'll notice the investment income at $3,800, and that was the receipt of the interest that was earned while Alpine County was holding our property tax revenues. They paid us the interest that they earned on that, which was very nice of them. Moving on to water on page 130. You see operating revenues for water year to date are right at plan, just under by $860. And then total operating for water is up from plan by $42,000, but is still running at a loss of $19,000.
But again, why is that? Again, is that a timing issue? Where we do?
It was just anticipated projects, anticipated staff time. More staff's been working on wastewater than water.
I see.
Mostly in the capital side, so you won't even see it in the operational side, but they've been working on the manhole project and the smoke testing and whatnot.
Which is why when we get to, if you want to turn on to wastewater, you can see that there is a large variance in salaries and wages and taxes and benefits. And that's just because those get posted directly to the manhole account. Yeah.
And they get capitalized and depreciated.
They do. It's part of the whole project. So, operating revenues for wastewater are up from plan by $17,000, and year-to-date total operating for wastewater is up by $89,000. But again, still operating at a loss of $32,000. Moving on to electric on page 133. Operating revenues year-to-date are up by $54,000, and total operating for electric is up from plan by $139,000. Moving on then to snow removal, you'll notice there is a large variance in salaries and wages and benefits, and we've all previously talked that is due to contract negotiations and things of that nature. But you can see it is coming back into line for the month of September, since contract negotiations had been completed at that time.
So, just a question on snow removal revenue. So I noticed that all of the HOAs have signed contracts, so that's done, and there's still 5 driveway contracts that haven't been signed, and a few people they dropped. Is that relatively accurate?
That's about right. Drew's on top of maintaining that spreadsheet now.
Yeah.
I think we were at 4 or 5.
Yeah. Okay.
I think we just had one signed this morning. So
Maybe the absence of snow is discouraging active participation.
most of these people just saying they forgot. Some people sent in payments without the contract. It happens every year like this. This is actually less than what we've had in my last 2 years in terms of latecomers.
Okay, moving on to propane on page 136. Operating revenues are right at plan, just slightly up $215, and total operating is up from plan by $30,000. And that is all I have on income statements. Was there any questions?
Well, in wastewater, that's kind of an interesting dynamic where the more we do in-house, at least, to fix our aging system, the more expense we can capitalize.
Mm-hmm.
So from at least an income statement standpoint, it looks better.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, is it better, or is that like shuffling?
You're basically, the cash is leaving.
Yeah, so my opinion is in certain types of projects, our staff is more efficient than hiring a contractor and going through that whole process. In some situations, it's not. The manhole project is a good example of where we've become pros at it, and a little slow going last year, but we banged out 14 manholes this year. And so, yes, it offsets my regular O&M, but that means other things aren't getting done at the plant necessarily, but we're coming into... We're developing new SOPs, new operations manuals, new desk manuals for all employees, so we're getting that in line as well.
And your point, Kelly, is cash, and it doesn't really matter where you put it.
I mean, we're still paying them to do the work. It's just being reported in a different spot on the financial statements.
I agree.
And September EBITDA, we are better than planned by $115,000, and year-to-date we are better than planned by $390,000. And again, EBITDA is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. Okay, moving on to October revenues. We are up from plan for October by $42,000, and year-to-date up from plan by $201,000. And there was lots of activity in the Valley in September. we had mentioned in the Finance Committee meeting, there were lots of weddings this summer. There were, people here trying to escape their power outages and things like that. So, really good start to the year.
That's good.
Moving on to cash flow. October ended at a total of $2.4 million. Our operating budget was $1.8 million. So again, there's a $629,000 variance, but as we've previously discussed, it's just due to the timing of when we had expected to be completed with projects and when we actually did get them completed. So you'll see I think it's going to come more back into line in November. And still the low point is in December, for this year is in December. And obviously we won't let the operating cash get down to $300,000. We'll move money from the LAIF into our operating cash. But we are getting great performance out of the LAIF account with the money that we do have, which we talk about a little bit in the next section.
We did have a scheduled move from LAIF back into it, so we just moving it up a month.
What is your December 2020 cash flow point projected to be?
I don't know that number off the top of my head, Standish. I'm sorry. I have to finish working out the rest of the cash flow.
That's right. You haven't done it. That's what you're saying.
Uh-huh. Okay. Known budget variances. The only thing that changed were we added snow removal salaries and benefits through September 30th. Other than that, no other new.
Can you explain that? I was trying to look through in the other parts of the packet. Was that because Tom Harris, our mechanic, has put so much effort into?
Part of it is Tom. Part of it was all my time, Corey's time. Bob thankfully donates his time, Rick's time, going through the 7 iterations we did on snow removal modeling.
And that was this fiscal year.
That is this. Some of this
It
was
was
done.
most of my son.
And mine.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay.
And just briefly, the board recalls, maybe we didn't because we didn't meet in October, the 950F rebuild that was a budget variance. There was significantly more wrong. We talked about this in operations, but there was significantly more wrong with the 950F loader, including redoing the entire electrical system. So it was much more than we thought. We thought it was just hydraulics, transmission, and an engine. It was more. So that's why they did a complete rewire, as I recall, Rick. So just so you know what that was for, so we have it ready for snow removal season. And it is back and it is operating. So we had the RPM on it 2 days ago, testing it out. So it's working.
Good. Any questions from the board? Audience? Any questions on Kelly's presentation? Thank you.
I'm going to sit here.
Yes, you
Yeah.
are.
We have the next one, 8C, is performance reporting and aquifer levels.
Oh,
Nope.
no.
8C is investment policy quarterly report
Yes.
on page 1.
It's not on my agenda.
You wanna-
Oh, okay, I get it. I'm sorry.
So
8C, yes.
we presented a report to the Finance Committee, and it was determined that we should continue to use the LAIF. You can see with the LAIF statement on there, you can see our total deposit for the quarter for interest was just about $6,200. So we are getting good performance out of the LAIF account.
What does that work out to on an interest rate?
2.5,
yeah, I think that's-
2 and,
yeah.
2 and 5/8, somewhere right in there.
And that's a money market fund, right? Or a money market?
It's
Local
the
agency investment fund, which is ostensibly a cash bond money market sort of fund run by the state. And the reason that we're reporting this, we're required to quarterly report it to the board based on the new investment policy the board adopted. So you'll see this once a quarter coming to the board. And because we're in LAIF, we can just give you the LAIF instead of answering the 30 questions that are in the policy. So it's much better this way. So let's stay in LAIF. That's what I'm saying.
And we also do still have $89,000 in our cushion of credit, which we're getting about $1,500 a quarter for that $89,000 that's in there. So. That's all I have.
Just write the effective interest rate on their handwritten.
Sure.
Any further questions from the board?
Yes, Dan, just going to give us an email about weekly, and I can just forward those to you, which actually lists.
Thank you, Kelly.
Maybe not weekly. I'll get it to you quarterly, though. But that way you're in the loop as treasurer, of course. Yeah, I do get those.
We'll move on to 8D, which is performance reporting and aquifer levels.
I got it.
Good morning. So we have performance reporting for October here. The sheets in your board packet do show August and September, which you haven't seen. For October, we had a production of 467,000 kilowatt hours, and that was a combination of powerhouse production and grid power. About 100,000 kilowatt hours came from the powerhouse when we were running during the power outages. We had a 13% loss in October for electric, bringing us to 15% for the year. Our goal is 12%. But this is not an unusual place to be this time of year before we get into higher use months. For propane, we have a positive loss, which is something that is somewhat unusual for us. We had October.
Something about conservation.
Yeah. It was very cold the last day of October, which serves to reduce the amount of propane available in our tanks, which helps us out if you're looking for a loss. So 1.2 million cubic feet produced or delivered to our tanks. 68,000 of those were considered losses. So 5% loss for October, 2% for the year, which is right on track for our goal, and we will wait to see what happens for the rest of the year. In water, we had a larger loss than expected this month, so 630,000 gallons produced from our wells. And if you take a look at the aquifer level sheet in your board packet, you can see that we were consistently using the wells and storing water. So some of our 34% loss, it can be attributed to higher tank levels, but the fact that the last 2 months of production in water have shown relatively high unidentified losses, we're going to look into that and see if we can tell if there is an actual problem or if it is simply a tank level issue for this time of year. For the year, we're at 19% loss, and we're shooting for 15%, so we're a little higher there than we would like to be.
Is there a reason why we don't just integrate the tank flows into the calculations?
We attempted to do that, but a couple of years ago, and we didn't have very consistent results. But it is something that I could look into again and see if we couldn't get a better way to track that.
So just out of curiosity, is the tank level a dipstick that we use, or is it electronically recorded?
It's not. It's a gauge.
All right, so that's good. That's a good sign.
And the other issue is too that we have a outflow meter out of the tank, but not an inflow meter into the tank. So there's only 1 meter, and we could add it, but a meter of that size is not insignificant in cost.
But I will look, Bob, to see if there's a way to make that a little more apparent that what's in the tanks.
I noticed in that nice lovely report that Eric sent us that nationwide the average loss is 10%. Just saying.
In a big city, lots of money.
The last here is wastewater. We continue to get good performance in wastewater. It's been a dry fall. 408,000 gallons treated at the plant, a loss of approximately 10%. And by loss, I mean unidentified treated water, bringing us to 19% for the year. So we will see how we go when it gets a little wetter, and we can see the results of our project out in the meadow. And that's all I have for performance reporting, unless there's any questions.
For the aquifer levels, I see that the 4 and 5 have really recovered. Is that because more is coming out of 2 now than it was previously? Because that's down at 24 feet, I think.
We have been using well 2 more than we had in the previous months. After we looked at our, we made sure that we were pumping clean water and had fixed all of our treatment issues over there. So I believe that that is correct.
Okay, so an obscure question. Do we have a way of measuring the temperature at the bottom of well 4 or 5?
No. I mean, we could do it. We don't have any way to do it with our current equipment or setup or anything, no.
It just relates to heat.
Sure.
Yeah.
Any questions from the audience? Thank you, Brandy.
I'm just curious. Sorry, Jeff. But on that question, do you think the water changes temperature much from the time it leaves, say, well 2, which is down 50 feet, I think, to the time it...
It's total depth. May not be the pump immersion depth.
Yeah, but to the time that you could actually put a thermometer to it or something?
I don't think we change significantly now. I mean, ambient temperatures in the Sierras are well known and well studied. I don't know that we need... Yeah, as I said, we don't know if we need to reinvent the wheel. We can just go to... I mean, you can go in any cave or mine around here, and it's going to be between 55 and 65. As an avid spelunker in my youth, I can guarantee you that.
Well, that's what I've been using, but
okay.
Just curious.
Very good. We'll move on to 8E, T1 Communication Line Repair Project.
So we are moving forward with an in-house T1 project. We went out to bid for this in hopes that a contractor would take this, and they declined. So we've been planning a project. It has been slow going. We've had several delays. We are still planning on starting next week with now a target date of Tuesday rather than Monday for this. And we're going to be starting at Bayer. So as you recall, over the past 5 years, we've had several breaks at the T1 fiber communication line where it crosses the bridges at Bear River and at Silver Lake. This project is to install an antifreeze gel in the conduit to keep that from happening. We budgeted this at $75,000, assuming that a contractor would do the work. We currently show that by doing it in-house that we could potentially come in under budget, but it is taking longer than we had hoped and taking our staff from other projects. I've included in the packet an updated estimate of probable cost, and with the contingency, right now we believe it will cost about $61,000. So we'll start that next week. We hope to have a 2-week project for both locations, but Silver Lake is going to require significantly more equipment and personnel. We'll be hiring a traffic control company and an overbridge scaffolding company, both of whom should be available week after next, but we are dependent on those external contractors for the Silver Lake portion of the project.
Does installing the gel or injecting the gel or however it's done depend on temperature? If it gets too cold, do you have to...
We're not in any issue with it right now.
Right.
Nor do we anticipate it even through the end of November. Yeah, it can be applied at pretty low temperatures. I mean, it's used in South Dakota, Michigan, Minnesota. So if they can do it, we can do it. But yeah, no, we have looked at that.
Sir, do we have any experience injecting gel?
Nope.
None.
However, that being said, the district engineer that we're using has been in contact with multiple contractors back east, mainly in Wisconsin, Great Lakes area, 2 different contractors who have basically walked him through how they've done it. He's also been in contact with the manufacturer in terms of specing out the right material. That was the first step, and then that's how we developed the bid plans, was based on those discussions. He will be on site with our crews, doing with us, lending his expertise as well to the project. So we're not flying blind.
Can the gel be removed once it's pushed?
No.
No, but
So if we could never add or modify the.
We have a spare conduit, though.
we do have a spare conduit. Manufacturer says that you can pull additional fiber through the gel once it's installed, but
okay.
we're going to see how.
Yeah.
Well,
using
we
the
never
is.
need that.
Yeah, using the existing fiber is
Yes.
basically is your tugging line,
Yeah.
which is not really good for tugging.
Okay.
Yeah, anticipation would be if we ever need to replace it, we would just replace the entirety of the conduit run, or use the spare conduit and then replace that as the new spare conduit. Be much cheaper.
And that's all I have on the T1 project.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll move on to the next item, 8F, which is the roof repair project, the treatment plant.
That's just a quick update on that. They received their final punch list. They are finishing the last punch list items, received their final inspection Friday, and when they finish their punch list items, they are done, and we should be receiving their first progress and final progress payment all in one shot. But it went well. We did upgrade, because they came in under budget, we had the opportunity to upgrade the roof material from a 90-mile-an-hour wind, and it's a fairly protected roof because of the parapets, but we went ahead and upgraded it to 130-mile-an-hour wind. Even though we don't really see that on the valley floor, because we had room in the budget, it was determined by staff that it was the right thing to do, since we were under budget, to go ahead and do that upgrade. So that was done. That's the only change from the original project, but we still will be coming in under budget for the entire project. And they're a little behind on schedule because of the PSPS and those heavy winds. They were obviously not applying those days. They had a little bit of weather at the beginning, but we're done before the wet season, and it hasn't rained on them or the roof, and we're very glad and happy with the product. And we were happy when they did the entire strip off that there was no significant repairs to the existing concrete roof that were required. That was quite surprising.
Good. Any questions on that project?
No, but good news in the wastewater treatment plant, I think, requires just a moment of appreciation. Okay, I'm done. That's gonna happen.
Okay, moving on to 8G, propane valve replacement project.
For this one, we did get bids for our request bid to replace the propane valves at the other tank. We received one bid from Bayview Engineering. It was lower than the estimate, and so the notice of award was issued. We got the contract documents, and the notice to proceed was also issued. That was issued on November 5th with a 30-day completion date. So they should be starting soon with completion by December 6th. And our tank levels are in good shape for them to be able to put all of our propane product into one single tank and complete this job. They do have a backup plan if necessary.
I should note that between our district engineer, Brandy, and myself, we were able to reduce the scope of the project, which is why it not only did it come in significantly less, but we actually reduced what we thought it was going to be in terms of the project. Also because we completed some last year that was included in that. So some of that project was completed in the last fiscal year. If you'll recall, the emergency repairs we had Kiva do. It was Kiva, right?
Yes.
So that's why it's significantly lower than our estimate.
So this is the project that keeps the tanks automatically.
The second phase of that project. We did the first phase on the 30,000. No, we did it on the. What tank did we do it the first time? The 20,000 gallon tank. This is on the 30,000 gallon tank.
So will this project be done when this phase is
Yes.
completed?
Yes.
And our district engineer is Dave Riley or something else?
Bailey Civil Engineering. Yeah, they've worked on. They're doing our water model as well, which is another budgeted project. But they've worked on all they're doing our standards as well. So we have a lot of projects going right now, trying to get done, catch up.
Any further questions on the propane valve project? Moving on to 8H, PG&E Public Safety Power Shutoff. An update from Brandy.
And so an update on our very active October. We were told by PG&E last year that they were expanding their public safety power shutoff program, PSPSs, to include transmission facilities to a greater degree than they had in the past. And since our transmission line is connected to their transmission facilities, they came up here in May, presented an overview of the program, and basically told us it would be a good time to get generators ready. We were affected by 4 PSPSs in October. The first one happened on October 9th. And we didn't get very much notice for that one at all. We had an automated phone call that came in about an hour prior to shutoff, and then the shutoff happened at about 3:15. Our staff restored power via the powerhouse generators, but we had several issues that happened during that outage. The first was a partial power outage on the residential circuit. Everything appeared normal at the powerhouse, but we kept getting calls that some houses throughout residential were not powered, and the three-phase users, which are the lower shop and the wastewater treatment plant, didn't have full power. So our staff traced that down. There was a single-phase transformer out by the rec center that an elbow, a high-voltage connection, had blown up during the outage. So found that, bypassed the transformer, got the power back up fully through the valley, and set everything up for the night. Everyone went home, and we had additional power outages that evening. And what we determined after restoring the power and coming back in and looking at it the next morning was that the original power outage also caused a problem with the PLC that controls the automatic filling of the fuel day tanks at the powerhouse. So the large tank outside pumps into these smaller tanks that run the generators, and that PLC was not functioning. So we had a busy morning of actually transporting fuel from the diesel tank here at the wastewater treatment plant up to the powerhouse, manually putting that in the day tanks. And then our staff was able to work a bypass system so that we can manually fuel by flipping a switch. And we have contractors that are working on repairing that system. It is still not back to its previous state. That was the first one. The second one went much smoother. We were notified earlier that a outage was expected. We preemptively switched over to generators. It was seamless. It lasted about a day. We were able to switch back the next day, still seamless, but we did have the issue that we had to go up every 4 hours, a staff member, and fuel the generators. Other than that, that one was pretty smooth. And then the last two, we here in the Valley only saw as one. We preemptively switched over to generators on Saturday, and we stayed on those through the next two PSPSs. But after we switched over, approximately 5 hours later, the residential feed opened. We had staff at the powerhouse. You could hear the generators pick up. Everyone suspected a ground fault. And so our staff investigated and eventually found that it was a ground fault on a direct buried line out near the service center across the highway. And those are power lines that were not accepted by the district when the district purchased the assets of Mountain Utilities. So the resort retains ownership of those lines. So once we figured out where it was, they were able to shut off that line here in the Valley leave that area de-energized and re-energize the rest of the residential feed. We continued on, like I mentioned, there was a brief period where we could have switched back to grid power. It was less than 24 hours, and our staff felt that it was in our best interest to stay on generators to avoid multiple switchovers, and so we did that. After the last PSPS ended on 10:30, on 10:30 in the morning, we switched back over, and we found that, as we have experienced in the past, the feeder breakers opened up as they should not in a general switchover. So this is a powerhouse control issue with the relay settings that we've talked about in the past. We actually had budgeted for in the future. We were able to shut those back. So we did have some goings on here. We kept the power on for the most part, but there were definitely some issues, and we looked at the financial impact of those. Before I go into that, are there any questions on just the operational issues?
Well, there's two general issues I just want to ask about. One is, why is there a relationship between equipment failing and power switchovers? Is it just an amazing coincidence, or why are those related? And then the second is, are we adequately testing our backup capability, because discovering that the fuel pump isn't working? And so those are two general questions, however you want to answer them.
Absolutely. So we do, especially with the first outage and the PG&E outage, anytime the power goes off and comes back on, there's a power surge that goes through the system. It seemed to be particularly problematic that time. We lost several pieces of equipment. Now, normally our systems are robust enough to handle that and not experience any problems, but we did see that PLC go down and the additional single-phase transformer issues. So there can be issues just with a general turning off the power, turning back on the power. As far as adequate testing, we do run the generators monthly. This issue happened as a result of that surge in the fueling PLC issue. So last time we ran it, everything fueled fine. The next time we needed it, it was a problem. The one thing we have not been able to do consistently is run the generators online, which is something that we would like to be able to do, but due to the controls issue, we risk having a power outage anytime we do that. So we have not done that as much as we would like to and plan to in the future once the control issue is fixed.
Okay. The other thing I would say is, I've gotten spoiled after 5 years of this. The clocks are always right, the power is always on. So I've gotten complacent.
The other thing I would add to what Brandy said, and it's something we've discussed before, but in the last 10 months, we've had 3 of the 40-year-old direct bury lines fail. They are at the end of their they are past the end of their useful life. This will continue until they are replaced with the direct bury cable line.
Remind me where those are.
So there's the backside. Yeah, so there's that one. There's going to the lake pumps, and then from Wintergreen to the north side of the highway and everything on the north side of the highway. Those are the bulk of them, right?
Right. The other one was the redundant line down Kirkwood Meadows Drive that we lost earlier this year.
Right.
Now, my understanding is we put in extra conduit under 88, so we can pull stuff through without cutting the highway.
This is at a different location than that. This is what feeds the Kirkwood in, which is a much different look. This is more to the east of that.
But this kind of relates to the north of 88 construction projects. If those are done, are those going to be fed by a direct burial?
No. Those aren't
so
to our
that's a
standards.
different line.
So, for example, if any project went north, not talking about the particular proposed project, if any project happened north of 88, they would be running all new. Essentially, the direct bury would be abandoned from Wintergreen all the way, and they would be running it to our current standards, which is conduit, spares, etc. So
The next time there's a PSPS, do you have a level of confidence that, other than the ground fault stuff over which we don't have all that much control, which I understand those things can happen, but within the powerhouse, do you have a level of confidence that we kind of know what happened, why it happened, and how to avoid having it happen again? Or is it still kind of a mystery, or is it just a matter of the control system needs to be reworked in some way?
A little bit of both. The fuel issue, I think we have, we don't have the solution to that yet, but we understand why it happened and what the solution is, and we'll be implementing that. The controls is a bit more of a mystery, not simply because we have no in-house expertise on the programming of these controls. So we have talked with Dave Wrightley and his new company at Cross Canyon Engineering, who had proposed to do this for us in the past. And they are going to be coming out to do investigation work and upgrades to those controls. The timing on that is still a little up in the air. The total solution to that is still a bit unknown, but we do think we have the right people in line to correct that problem as well.
My other question is, when there's an outage, residential or otherwise, what is the quickest practical way to communicate to people that there's an outage? And whether you know the reason or not, you know that there's an outage and that it's being worked on. The reason I asked this, I got a couple calls, couple conversations with people who did not understand. They assumed it had to do with PG&E, but even I didn't really know. I mean, in the case of the ground fault, I know the board had been communicated with, but what's the best way? Do we still have that emergency notification process or whatever? I mean, I know we've got Nextdoor. I know we have the email system. But is there a way to? What's the best practical way to do it as quickly as is reasonable? I guess is one. So people, quote, aren't in the dark, so to speak.
And that is something that we're internally working on. We do still have the emergency notification system. It was not used during this last outage, and that was partially on me because I was out of town, and so I wasn't close enough to do that, which we have done in the past. We did try to get it out on Nextdoor and on the Facebook channel so that people knew, but it's something that we will do in the future is make sure that these are notified out via every channel that's available to us.
Okay. Yeah, I just think that it's an important aspect of this, obviously.
Part of the problem was the timing on that one because it was a weekend after hours, and everybody available, me basically who could have sent the email out, was actually being the second qualified operator trying to resolve the issue. So. Right. Again, we've talked about that, and we can certainly try to address it in the future, but timing's going to be significant on future outages and how we can do it.
I have a question. So the direct line burial is Vail's responsibility, and there's a method of fixing that in the short term. I believe.
Are you making a pronouncement?
I would say a very limited possibility of
okay,
fixing
well,
it.
I guess what I'm going to is it's late in the year to be replacing all this, so I would guess they're going to fix it to get that operating down there.
Brandy met with them. They have a contractor. Looking at the project, from my 20-some years of construction experience, it could be a 2-week project easily done. Now, whether I'm not on that committee with Vail to help them facilitate that, but we've suggested what we thought would be the easiest thing to get it done.
Okay, I guess my question is, in the future, with this new project that's slated to be developed, we would run new service down there. which would not be direct burial, would we continue from that line to establish a new line down to the inn and the touring center?
That would
would
be-
that be the ultimate solution?
So, while we can't force Vail's hand, it would be to their benefit to participate with any developer on the north side. That being said, the developer on the north side, these direct bury cables that we don't own, but the transformers we do own, are on that parcel. So clearly that developer is going to be wanting to eliminate those and do them up to current standards. How Vail gets their power beyond that would be a negotiation between that developer and Vail. So Vail has a definite incentive to participate, and I believe they will with any development. It just makes sense. I mean, not only for electricity, but for water, sewer, and if propane goes, that would be the other thing. So there's an incentive for them to participate. There's a portion, obviously, the district owns a portion of the direct bury from the wintergreen transformer to the south side of the highway. We own that. So we would participate in that portion of it from our side as well.
So I just want to add a comment about the notification, because clearly it didn't go as well as we'd like, and that was procedural, it wasn't technical, so we can do better there. But I just want to remind people the way the emergency notification, anyone can sign up, and you can either be notified by email, by text message, or by voicemail, or all three. So I think that is still the most effective way. But in thinking about it, I think, and also we can subset it either by neighborhood or by individual account or by everybody. But I also think the other things we could do is anytime there's a general notice, we could automatically put it on our website as well. Because there's no place on the website right now for any operational issues, current operational issues. And we could automate putting it on our Facebook and other places. So I think we should make it a single place that you do it and then cause that to distribute it everywhere else rather than having to be a staff memory process of how to do it. So I think we can strengthen it. I think we should learn from this experience and make it better.
Yeah, that'd be nice, one-stop shopping. So maybe could we add that to a future IT committee topic? That'd be great.
Any other board questions, comments? Not? Bertrand?
Now that we had the first fault on the north side and we know that it's not installed in the best practice way, do we have an easy way to turn off that section in the future? And when if check another outage, maybe that's the first one that we need to check?
Yeah, it's turned off now.
Yeah.
And we turn it off with the transformers, and there's 3 transformers over. 3?
It all comes together.
2 transformers over there, one on wintergreen plus those 2. So we can isolate it from the transformers. That's what we have right now. It's isolated before the service station.
Which is easy now, not so easy once we get significant snowfall.
Yeah.
Because it's down in the meadow. But we do know where it is. It is locatable. It would just take us longer in the winter.
Because the same way we have water piping aging issue, we probably also have electric wire aging issues. So these kind of things are going to happen more frequently.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I agree 100%, and that's why we're trying to get a bit more proactive and aggressive about our infrastructure. We're doing a water model now, which has never been done on the system. We will be doing a propane distribution system model, proposing that next year, as well as a sewer collection system model. None of these things we have, and they're the most basic thing we need to address and identify issues.
Good. Any other questions on this item? Thank you, Brandy. We'll move on to 8I, electric renewables, propane carbon offset project.
All right, well, I'll start by giving everyone a brief background, just for the benefit of everyone who hasn't been here for all the discussions. So the Renewable Energy, or the Renewable Energy and Carbon Offset Program was developed to give customers the option to have 100% renewable electricity or offset all their emissions from their use of propane. And we do this by purchasing RECs for the electricity and purchasing offsets for the propane offset. So on October 21st, we did a soft launch of the program to about 20 customers that participated in the survey, in the carbon offset survey that was distributed at the beginning of August. That generated 8 purchases of both RECs and offsets. So that we then went live to all customers on October 23rd, and that has generated 31 purchases to date. And that's, of those 31 purchases, 25 purchases were for both RECs and offsets, and 5 were for RECs only. So this program will end on November 15th this year, and will be available again starting on October 1st of 2020 for a 1-month period.
So did you feel like it went pretty smoothly? I mean, in terms of the mechanisms and so on?
Yes, we
And
got...
I know for me it was
Yeah,
very easy to do it.
It took me 15 seconds and I bought mine and I was done.
And I haven't had any feedback of any issues that people were having. People were saying it was great, worked easy, worked smooth.
Congratulations to you, to Bob, and all.
And your idea,
Yeah.
so
Yeah, it was
you
Eric's
as well.
idea.
Yeah, an idea is easy.
Yeah.
Execution is
Well, this actually wasn't that. It took minimal staff time to get this going.
Which is our
and,
goal.
You know, of course, with the help of Bob
Thankfully.
and Corey, thank you. It all went smoothly and fairly easy.
So I think the next step is to continue to communicate it, maybe at the summer meetings, HOA meetings, and so on, and continue to encourage people
Yes.
to consider it at least. Look
Yes,
into it.
and then the lead up to the opening next year, there will be newsletter articles and email blasts and
Right.
I think the
such.
key will also be for the HOAs to consider it in their budgets. And so for members of HOAs who want to encourage their management to go in this direction, having them know what the costs are. I mean, I think we need to think about creatively, and Bertrand, I hope you'll be able to help us. How can we creatively get the HOAs on board through their members supporting it during the budget cycle, so then they can sign up?
Yeah, and that's the other thing we're going to continue to develop, because I'm one of the rec-only purchasers, because propane is through communal boilers. I don't have my individual propane, so I don't know what my offset is. It would be through the HOA, so that's something else that Bob and I have been talking about. We're going to work on how we can communicate that to the HOA and how they can spread that amongst their residents.
Very good. Any questions?
So how many accounts do we have, just to have a sense of the percentage? Because that seems to be pretty low to me, 29 out of... How many
How many
accounts?
electric accounts do we have?
700. So
Yeah,
this
but-
is very low penetration of the market.
Yeah.
We need to do better on communicating and just...
And I would note, on our survey results, we had much higher people saying they would participate. They have yet to participate. So it's easy to say it in a survey, maybe not so easy to pull the trigger on the money.
Well, they might not have noticed.
I was going to send out another reminder on Monday to try to generate some more purchases before this closes on Friday.
Good. Any other questions, comments on this one? If not, we'll move on to the board roles and responsibilities binder.
All right, so
Great.
starting on page 154 of your packet and taking up the bulk of your packet is the board roles and responsibilities binder. So we have made some additions to this binder, more than what you all received from when you took office. So we added a general set of guidelines for board members to follow regarding their responsibilities and roles and how to communicate with staff and community members and other board members. So that's just a helpful document and help orienting new folks. We also added the CSDA's board member handbook, and that gives an overview of what special districts are and what the governing body does for special districts and what your role is, and that's just a general overview of special districts in all of California. So the Personnel Committee has reviewed this packet and recommends approval. And upon approval, I'll distribute this to all existing board members since there's new stuff in there, and then incoming board members as well.
I would say a great effort. This thing continues to expand. I think it's useful information for board members. So
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's a great package material. I do have a handful of comments. Is that okay? And well, let's see. 2.1. Well, let me just make a general comment. Let's see, how do I say this? I agree that communications, well, particularly to staff, I mean, communications to staff should go through the general manager, no question about that. There are some communications that I think need to go to the general manager and potentially a committee chairperson, so the committee chairperson is aware of it. I also think that some of the communications with our attorney should always include the general manager. But, for example, Eric and I have jointly called Dick Shanahan a couple of times. So you don't have, serial communication where interpretation and everything, meaning can get lost. So I don't know exactly how to incorporate that. I mean, I noted, again, I'm sorry, I had cataract surgery, so my vision right now is not the greatest because this lens and this eye don't agree very well. So everything's a little blurry. That's not normal, Bob, for me.
I know that.
But anyway, like 3.3, simple information requests. Individual board members may make simple requests of staff. I can't, I'm not quite sure how I put that down. The key thing I want to say is there are times when a board member might have a question, and as I have in the past, I don't go to the general manager, I go to the committee chair. Oftentimes, I've wanted to do both in an email or a combination. I'm not sure that's accommodated in this. It may just be common sense that that's what you would do. But I think there are some issues in which it's important for the committee chair to be aware of the question or the potential agenda item or whatever it may be. So I guess that's one general comment. A specific thing on 7.8. In practice, I know what 7.8 says. This is about the election of a committee chair. What 7.8 says, and I remember when we did this back in 2012, I think, we basically said, anybody on the committee could be the chair. But in practice, that hasn't been the case, and I actually don't think it's a good idea. I think one of the two board members should be the chair. For agenda items, for coordination with other board issues, for a variety of reasons. So I don't think we can change policy here in this meeting because it's not really an agenda item. But 7.8, I think, should specify that the committee chair should be one of the board members rather than what it says. I think policy 130, this issue came up. Policy 130 has to do with communications from the public to us, like emails. I know this came up once earlier this year. I can't remember what the context was, but I remember it coming up. I think that email communications that are other than just turn the irrigation water off at my house, or I've got an issue with my driveway or whatever, policy-related type thoughts, communications, issues from community members should be included in the board packet so that the board members are aware of those communications. It's a judgment call about which one of those things are, but they belong in the board packet. They don't belong in minutes. They belong in the board packet. Policies, the 600 series in general, are from 1986, and I think they really only refer to water, or possibly water and wastewater.
Water and wastewater, and sometimes solid waste, but incorrectly so.
Yeah, so I think to the extent that those things relate to electric and propane and so on, we should be updating those policies. And I've got a couple of others which I can email or something. Again, it's a little hard for me right now to see my writing.
Yeah.
But
So, Eric, just to a general comment, one of the projects on my wall of things to do is to go through the policies. There also, I would note that some of these policies in this table of contents are wrong, and there's one missing that I found when I was reading through board minutes from 95 forward about the solid waste issue. For example, section 810.01 doesn't exist in here, and it needs to. So there's some update that needs to be done. But one thing Jess and I have been working on is basically going through the board binders, meeting by meeting, and because I know some of these 610 was updated in 17. I know that for a fact because I've read it, and I think it was June of 17. So there's a few things that need to be updated in this, but this is just relative to the board binder, including all the policy statements. We're not going to adjust the policy statements through this. We're going to go through and bring them back to the committee and the board. So that is, I'm tracking that on my radar, and maybe we should add that to my goals next year, but it is something that I already have. If you see my whiteboard in my office, it's there for us to do. So we will be working on that, Jess and I. It's one of our projects that's kind of high on the list right now.
So in approving this, we're not necessarily approving the policies as they stand. That they
You're just
need to
approving the
change.
binder, including
That's number one.
this.
Number two, there are certain things here which are I think, hard and fast, like communicating to staff through you, unless there's a staff member is working with you on a subcommittee or something like that, then that's a different story. I think there's some things where we just have to use common sense in communications. It's really a communications issue, and again, this just has to do with alerting committee chairs to an issue sometimes when it's appropriate.
Right.
And that a board member wanting to speak to another board member under the Brown Act shouldn't be restricted by policy. Just because, I've talked to every board member at one point or another. I've talked to Peter about snow removal stuff. I've talked to everybody within the Brown Act, but I don't want anybody saying, "Oh no, you can't do that." You've got to. It's not a spoken wheel communication process.
Yeah, and I don't think it says that you can't talk to other board members.
Yeah.
It says you just need to talk to them within the bounds of the Brown Act. That's all it says.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
And then the other thing I would add to that is, in practicality, for example, board members communicating with staff with great regularity, because I tell Jess, work with Bob on the propane offsets, and so she's just working. I'm just getting CC'd, so I'm in the loop on things. But that happens with great regularity.
And you're also all customers, so you can interact with us on that level.
As a customer, sure.
Yeah.
That's a different story. Thank you, but I think it's great. Having this all together like this is fantastic. So thank you for doing it.
Jess worked really hard on this and pulled a lot of stuff from a lot of this is just CSDA and Aqua template that we've taken and modified to our unique, and she's been on the CSDA website soliciting comments from other districts throughout the state. She's been quite active in pulling this all together, so she definitely deserves credit for doing that.
Thank you.
So related to that, in the Personnel Committee when we discussed this, the question came up whether we had any document management system for tracking these things, and it might be worth their while. There are incredibly complex ones that cost lots of money and come with consultants, and then there are simple ways of doing it. So that might be something that would help prevent something from disappearing by doing that. So that's something that we talked about that possibly might be a reduced staff time for tracking everything.
Any other comments, questions from the board? Bertrand?
Yeah. First, I second and concur with the comments that Eric made. I think they are valid comments. My understanding of the Brown requirement is that if there is a majority of board members in a specific occasion, whatever it is, and it's not actually in an assembly, we cannot discuss all actions that are pertinent to our jurisdictions, basically. But if you have only 2, I don't think we have a majority. I don't think there should be any restrictions. That's my understanding. And I could be wrong, but I'd like to have, the way I read it, both what said Council from KMPUD and online and the various ads, one of them that you sent me actually, it's not clear to me that you can prevent effectively 2 boards to discuss. And,
Well, what happens?
We're going to get in Brown Act training.
Right, but my understanding and also just the risks. So yes, two board members can discuss something. The risk is that somehow accidentally or by, you start talking about the same thing to another board member, or the other board member starts talking to another board member. Then all of a sudden you've got a chain, and that's a violation. So if the understanding is you're talking about something, but you're not going to talk to any other board member about it, that's fine. But the other thing, and just think of Hunter Biden. Just think of that situation. It's appearances. It's not even if it's a fact. It's just what it looks like to people. And so you've got to be careful about what things might look like, as well as what is actually happening. So that's it's just you got to be more careful than you think you have to be.
Any other comments on this? If not, can I hear a motion to approve the revised board roles and responsibilities binder?
I would like to make that motion, but I think 7.8 is not a policy, but that has to do with the committee chairs.
I'm not reading the 7.8 you're reading. I must be.
Me neither.
Just a second here.
7.8.
Put 7.8 committee chairs. Well, wherever the committee, where it says committee chairs, a committee chair can be any of the members of the committee or board. I think that should change to one of the board members should be the committee chair.
So that must be part of all of the board policies?
Yeah, you must be seeing that one of the policies possibly.
Okay. If it's a policy thing, then we can't change it here. So, okay.
Well, we can address it.
Yes.
I'll second the motion to adopt.
You made the motion.
I made the motion?
Yeah.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded at least once. All in
you
favor?
second, Standish?
Aye.
Aye.
Good day, aye.
Maybe more than the cataracts do.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you, Jessica. Moving on to 8K, report of wastewater discharge consultant. Eric?
Yes, so we've been talking about will serve capacity and planning for quite a while, and finally had some time to start digging into it as part of the 218 process, the rate study that's going on as well. And what I discovered, there was an error in the early 2017 calculations. They assumed the theoretical capacity of the plant based on the new membranes, but no one ever updated our permit or requested an update to our permit. Long story short, in order to realize the capacity of the membranes, we need to go to the Regional Water Quality Control Board with what's called a report of waste discharge and submit a new one to them so we can get a new waste discharge requirements, which is WDR. The acronyms are inverted, but that's what they are. And so we need to go to them, get a new WDR to realize our capacity. While we're at it, there's quite a few functional issues that we have in the current permit that are problematic for staff and unnecessary in staff's opinion, as well as other professional consultants I've talked to, the people that are doing our quarterly reporting to the state, that we would also at that time, we might as well, we're getting a bite at the apple, let's go for everything, and we're going to try and get some changes made to frequency of testing, type of testing, type of routine reporting requirements at the same time. Estimates are between $35,000 and $50,000, not including regional board costs, to retain a consultant to prepare a new report of waste discharge.
You said 30 to 50,000?
35 to 50 is my guess. It's been a while since I've hired anyone for an RWD, but That's my experience.
This is currently an unbudgeted cost.
Absolutely.
So the operations committee, we discussed this in our last meeting, and we recommended approving it.
So I just want to ask a
Sure.
question about timing. I'd be more comfortable after knowing there was snow and we're going to have a good year. Is there a difference in waiting till?
There is.
Waiting till January?
There is. We've received violations so right now we're limited in our treatment plant to 274,000 gallons per day on a peak day. We have received notices of violation in the past for exceeding that. Getting it to our actual rated capacity of theoretical, and it may come down from this, of 345, would avoid some of those notices of violation we received in the past. Now, there haven't been, as I understand it, because they all predate me, monetary ramifications with those violations, but the more violations you get, the more likely you will see a monetary fine from the regional board. It's a gamble.
The other aspect of it is with this potential development, I mean, I know they're just in due diligence right now. Right now, technically, we could not give them a will serve.
Yeah, technically I'm oversold right now, technically. With the existing, with the built-out parcels, I am oversold by, I believe it was 84, 83 EDUs, 85 EDUs, I was close. I'm oversold right now. Getting the permit changed would immediately remedy that issue.
Any other questions?
And the planning committee recommends doing this.
Operations.
I know.
Operations.
We're planning to, you guys discuss it also.
I'm not on planning on operations.
No, we didn't.
We didn't.
We didn't discuss it.
Oh, you didn't? Okay.
I mean, the other option is, with the improvements we're doing to the plant, we could possibly realize some gains in capacity, but I think they're insignificant compared to this. So, again, going to Bob's point, could we wait? We could. Absolutely.
So when we get an infiltration event,
This is a pertinent
Yeah.
upgrade.
Mm-hmm.
you know, we could.
Yeah. I think the biggest
We're
we've ever...
trying to correct that, but
And Peter, maybe you remember, but I think the biggest we've ever seen, or maybe Brandy, was 423 was the biggest we ever saw on the biggest event in 16-17, the Sprain on Snow event. I think that was our peak day, and we did receive a notice of violation for that.
Okay.
I'm prepared to make a motion that we approve this.
I'm convinced I'll second it.
Okay.
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Moving on to 8L, Snow Removal Action Plan for 2019-20. Eric.
So just wanted to bring back the action plan that was adopted by the board so the board could see where we are. So I just wanted to go over a few of these things so as we develop the action plan for next year, which I want to continue the use of this action plan every year, see some things that make sense to do and make sense to discontinue. So starting with advertising, the bulk of our applications came through Indeed. We received 34 applications, and this will be interesting to note. We had 34 applications, 5 scheduled interviews, and 4 people actually showed up for interviews. We made 4 offers, and 3 were accepted. Through ZipRecruiter, we had 5 applications, no scheduled interviews, nobody showed up. District website, we had 2 applications, 2 interviews scheduled, both showed up. We made offer to 1. However, the one we made the offer to didn't show up for the first day of work and was terminated. And didn't return calls as to why he didn't show up. Yeah. Local newspapers, we had 1 application from that. We didn't make any offers as a result. Through the flyers that we post, and we post them here, I post them all down the bulletin boards in Amador County. We had 1 application, and we hired that person. Nothing through Facebook. 2 applications through employee referrals, but no offers are made from those. Nothing from Nextdoor, and nothing from Craigslist. We have 2 returning snow removal operators, a Tier 3 and a Tier 1. So that's where the advertising sat. My recommendation is next year we drop everything except for Indeed and local website and flyers and do that only. There's a significant cost, and you're asking about snow removal costs. We're at $800 per cycle we run this, and we ran multiple cycles because we weren't getting a lot of applications. So it's very expensive to run them in local papers. ZipRecruiter and Indeed are not terribly expensive. ZipRecruiter is more expensive, so we've hired a fellow from North Carolina, sight unseen, did a Skype interview, and Maryland. So just people looking to come to California and do some skiing, and we were able to get them, and so far they're working out well. So, and
these people that are likely to use the housing, local housing.
Yes, and I'll get to that in a second. But right now, but let me get to that.
Okay.
So the referral incentive, we had that in place. None of them were hired, but if we still have one position available right now, so we'll see what happens with that. And it's my referral, so go figure. So as of November 1st, we're at 86% of our hiring goal. The only position we have empty is the Tier 4. We would consider substituting a Tier 3 for that. And we did substitute the Tier 2 with the Tier 1 because we had another person apply that was a Tier 1 level that was a good match, and we went ahead and made that substitute. I did get some comparables. I've been looking at the various hiring sites just to see what other people are doing. Caltrans pays a little bit more than us, but they require a Class A license with a Type N endorsement. That's really hard to get in. We're requiring a Class C license and that you be breathing. So those are our requirements.
At altitude, though.
At altitude. City of Southlake, they pay less than us. Well, they pay right in the same wheelhouse as us, but they require a Class B. El Dorado County, they pay right in the same range as us, and they require a Class B or A. Mammoth Lakes pay a little bit more than us. They require a Class B, and Truckee pays more than us, but obviously Truckee cost of living makes Kirkwood look like nothing, and they require a Class B or A as well. So we're right in the wheelhouse with everybody we're competing with for staff. And I would note that Caltrans is at 30% of their hiring level, and we're at 86%, so neener. So in terms of staffing levels, where we're at and where we actually ended up, so you can see that in terms of the full, our Dave Waddle, he's through 11-1. He spent about 68 hours. Joe Pellerin exceeded his hours during the off season by 1.5 hours, and that's okay. And right now he's up to 68. Joe Pellerin was about 3/4 of his anticipated time off season. The mechanic, however, spent almost the entirety of his summer working on snow removal equipment. Basically, maintenance on it had been deferred or not done correctly for a long time, and he had to do a lot of catch-up, and that's what he spent almost the entirety of his summer doing. So he well exceeded the anticipation by about 6 times what we expected. So he spent about 541 hours, and we expected 80. But all our equipment's running really well right now, so that's a good thing. I'm not upset that was spent, but that's one of the overages. So you can see all the full-time seasonals, they're working. The one thing I would note too, and I've talked about this with a couple of you, is the regional unemployment rate's hovering under 4% in this area, and hiring people is difficult. As I mentioned, Caltrans at 30% of their total staffing. With the exception of one returning person who was on a part-time model before, no one is willing to come into 20 hours a week or the 320 hours the board set. So we've hired them all as full-time. We'll manage them as the season goes through, but I mean, if we have a banner season, we're going to have these guys full-time through. If we have drought, then we'll address that, make changes as we need to make them there. So we've hired them all as full-time through the snow removal season. So that is another change. Let's see. Scrolling way down. So housing, to go to Bob's question. So we had 3.5 double units available. And as of right now, 2 is filled because one of the employees already lived on Mountain, one of the seasonals, so he lives in the Meadows. So we have 2.0 of the double units occupied by seasonal housing. Another half of that is occupied by a permanent. So we're using housing. So we have what we need. Purchasing those other units definitely has helped free that up, and we have a place to put them immediately. And they're taking advantage of it. Obviously, the North Carolina and Maryland are definitely taking advantage of it. So it's good. So we're glad to see them using that. It makes them here in the valley when we need them. No getting snowed off Mountain. It's helpful, better than last year. Training is going per plan. In terms of equipment, everything is up and running. We finally got the 950F back. The GPS equipment we've been having some issues with. I think, Drew, those have all been run to ground at this point, with the exception of the 924.
924 is working now.
Okay.
It's the 950 GC and T5.
So we have two that we're still working with. We're working with the vendor. We will have those up and running before season starts. So almost as Bob mentioned, all the HOA contracts are done. We have 5 lingering out there in terms of private driveways, but they've all indicated their intent to sign, or they paid and forgot to sign. So not terribly worried about those. We have had one person who is planning on selling their house later on. They aren't going to be coming up this winter, and they declined to sign their contract because they won't be here. So that makes sense. We did have the DocuSign option. I would say we had about a third of the residential contracts participate in that. It worked quite well, so I was very pleased with that. The goal will be to get everybody on it, but I'm happy with the third, to be honest with you. So it worked very, very well. We did add the automatic renewal clause for the private driveway, so next year it'll just automatically renew and with the new rate, and we don't need to sign contracts again, which will be great. With that, I think we're on track. So I'm cautiously optimistic that we're ready when the snow gets here, not if.
Automatic renewal clause. Are they still notified, though, that they have a chance to opt out if they want?
Oh, of course. Yeah, there's a termination clause in the contracts. Yeah, they can terminate.
You either send us money or you send us a notification.
Yeah.
But you don't have to sign anything.
Right. Running down the contracts is always, I mean, for the time I've been here, has been just a pain. Drew's taken over, helping with running that to ground, and like I said, we're down to 5, which is better than we have been. So I think DocuSign probably helped with that.
Sounds pretty good.
Cautiously optimistic.
Yeah, no, those are good words.
Yeah. Stakes are finishing up. Crews are doing the stakes right now. I'm sure you've seen them going up and around through the valley. So, going well.
Any further questions from the audience?
I see in your report that you're mentioning towing. Do you have any plan to tow cars that are blocking the road, or what is it?
We were asked to investigate it, and I was able to find a company that does towing, and we shared that with all the HOAs.
Okay.
That was all we were doing on that.
So
Nothing on our end.
Yeah.
Aside from fire hydrants, we will tow people blocking hydrants, but not for snow removal issues. That's the HOA's bailiwick.
The other comment I would make is that considering the remoteness of our situation, that you would find Tier 4 operator at the range of salary that you are offering. Sounds to me, if you want that kind of caliber of person, we have to pay more than that.
Very good. Any other comments? We'll move on to item 8M, playground. Update and possible action.
Sure. So there's 2 staff reports in here. One is the old one. Unfortunately, the headers were lost off this, and I don't know why, and I apologize for that. So this is the old staff report, page 433, through the pretty pictures. So I'm just going to skip down to the real staff report, which starts on page 450. So there's a few things we've talked about, and there's been a lot of discussion about this. So we need to replace, the bottom line is we need to replace the playground structure itself. The swings, the climbing walls, and the spring toys are fine. So there's no issue with those. All the repairs that were required on those items have been made by staff, and they made them this summer, and so we're in good shape next summer to put them back up as is. But the play structure is not rehabable. Capital investment into that, could be anywhere from $74,000 to $94,000 to to get everything up to speed, which is the ADA improvements plus the new play structure and getting it purchased and installed. So right now the district has a year-to-year lease with a 30-day termination clause where the playground is. There's been some concerns voiced by some board members that if we're going to make a capital investment, that may not be wise to put it on where we could lose it in 30 days, and reasonably so. So things to consider could we look at a longer term lease with Vail for that parcel, and the suggestion was made at planning equivalent to the life cycle of the equipment. That seems like a reasonable thing to do, the depreciated life of the playground structure itself. I think that would help the district's concerns. Would Vail be willing to do a parcel split and quit claim this about 0.11 acre parcel to us out of the 26 acre parcel like they did for the tennis courts? That's a separate fee title parcel. And then once we install it, once we purchase the equipment, if that's the board's pleasure, and we install it, would it make sense for us to transfer the asset to KCA or to Vail to operate and maintain? Since it's not, if it wasn't on our parcel, we just would get the structure built and they would operate and maintain. Does that make sense? These are all things that have been discussed. In terms of financial impacts, Parks and Rec runs at a deficit every year. That's mainly due to G&A and labor. So right now we back fund it through property taxes, which obviously we all know are committed to electric. So the tier structures got off. What would that mean? But we have, I did apply for the eligibility criteria for the multi-use parklands grant through the state. Those guidelines are supposed to come out for the actual application process in January, which really means March. And we also applied for Vail's Epic Promise grant for the purchase of the structure itself, not including the ADA improvements. We did dig into this with Shanahan about the 501c3. Could it be used to facilitate the financial portion of this and make things offset in terms of donation? The answer is yes. It's for the benefit of the Kirkwood community. That is allowed. So we could do that. But it should only be used for equipment purchase purposes, not O&M. So we can use the 501c3 to buy it and route it through as a pass-through to make it beneficial to people in terms of tax implications. But the maintenance should be through our normal Parks and Rec fund. Could we do a fundraising campaign? We need to define what the project is, which we should probably pick which play structure we want to buy, option 1, 2, or 3, or something else. Do we want to include the ADA improvements in there, get some artistic renderings, and develop a project that we can go to the community with? Do we want to do that as a winter campaign solicitation? Do we want to talk about using summer festival next year to benefit that? These are all options for policy decisions for the board to consider. I think this has been before about 3 committees, so I'm hoping all of you are relatively up to speed on it, except for, I think, with the exception of Jeff. He's maybe only just when I talked to him about it. So I'm happy to answer any questions and looking to get some real policy decision direction from the board so staff can implement it.
We talked about it yesterday at planning. I think that there was pretty much of a consensus that we need a longer-term lease or ownership, one or the other. The ownership could be that if it's not used for playground for some reason, that it could revert back to Vail. But one or the other is a certain thing. We certainly support replacing the structure. I understand from Frank that the transfer to KCA for operations probably is not a practical thing. Is that what?
It's really just a reflection of KCA just increased the HOA dues, and we want to go back to the board with another reason why subsequently we'd be looking at additional costs. We already have costs associated with the tennis courts, so they're in our current budget.
My own thought was expressed at the planning committee was that I like the PUD maintaining it and operating it. And I'm very pleased that we applied for a couple of grants So I guess that's what, the main thing is the securing the land for sufficient time. And then how we fund it sort of depends on whether these grant monies come through or not. And I think the survey, I mean, whether or not, how important the playground is to people would go through the normal survey, right? The biennial survey. I think that's what I was told, what we were told.
What was your last statement? I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
Well, there had been talk at one point to survey the community, say how important is this playground to you, you know? My understanding is the decision was made, or the recommendation has been made to include that in the biannual survey, the customer survey that we do.
Correct.
Well, your thoughts are in line with mine. I'm not on the planning committee, but I think that the playground, as I said before, replacing a 25-year-old play structure is not unexpected, and I would like to see us do it. Number one. Number two, I think that we could raise the funds to do that. I believe we could. I strongly believe we could raise the funds to do that, and I also agree that I wouldn't really want to do it unless we had a longer-term commitment to the land. Meaning, 30-day cancellation clause is not something I'd want to go raise that money for. And I probably would be inclined to keep it in the PUD. I know that's not ideal for you, but it's, yeah. And I don't think the KCA has the money to take it on. And I frankly wouldn't want Vail running it.
So my view on this is, if this were a rational situation, property taxes are typically used to pay for parks and recreation. So if we thought of this as the town of Kirkwood, and I don't know if it is a town or not technically, but I read in our audited financials that it's the town of Berkeley. So using that and saying that's why you pay property taxes is for that service. We're the only entity managing the property taxes. So unfortunately, I think it's our obligation to use the property taxes for this purpose. And so I don't see moving it anywhere else as viable. I think we have to decide whether we're trying to get this done by next summer, or we don't care when it gets done. If we don't care when it gets done, then applying for grants that we might get or not in time to do it for the summer, but maybe for next year, doesn't make a lot of sense. So I think we need to decide first, if we're trying to get this available by next summer, we should do things that fit within that time frame. So I would propose that we insist that Vail give us a 20-year lease, consistent with the expected lifetime of the equipment. I think that's a fraction of the effort than trying to separate out the parcel from the rest of it in that specific time frame. I think in terms of the idea of not pulling the community, I question that because in some sense I'd like to know, have you ever used it? How often do you use it? I spend a lot of time on playgrounds with my grandkids. I'm on playgrounds twice a week. There's a big difference between the 5 and under and the 5 and older. We don't know what that ratio is. So in terms of selecting which of those things are, there seems to be a shortage of the under 5 from my brief analysis. So I think we need to know that. And at some point, we need to go to the community to raise money for this. And it has to be a complete plan, not a plan saying, here's a list of the 20 contingencies, please contribute. So I think we need to first decide today whether we're trying to get this done by next summer or not, because that changes a lot of the strategies, whether we're okay with a 20-year lease matching the time frame. And then I think we should at least discuss trying to get some knowledge of the expected usage patterns by discussing it with people. It also gives them a chance to have some awareness that that a replacement is under the works. If you care about it, you may want to volunteer. We might have an ad hoc community we can create some community knowledge through the process of deciding a couple of trade-offs behind this. So those are my thoughts.
I pretty much concur with everything that's been said so far. I'd like to see the district keep the playground in some form or another. We did have a lot of volunteerism with the original 2 playgrounds, and we do have enough equipment. It's mainly the play structure that we're replacing. So, going forward, if we don't have a plan together by the spring, at least we can put up all the rest of the equipment outside of the main play structure, which, it's better than nothing. But really, typically, this kind of a project is paid for with property taxes, and we've committed our property taxes to enterprise functions out of desperation. So I think there's somewhere along the line we've got to rationalize that, and there's a trade-off, and explain that to the community.
I agree. I think the O&M definitely should be. It'll be a deficit made up by property taxes. I think that this capital cost. You've got 2 grants that are possibilities. I'd like to see how those play out. So I'd be happy. I'd be fine with the play structure not being up next summer. Everything else, as you've said. But people aware that we are raising funds one way or another to do it. But I think that the first thing is to secure the land in one way or another.
I think that's the least Vail can do, is give us some kind of a commitment.
I just don't, timing-wise,
Right.
There's nobody at Vail here that can do that.
Right
Make
now.
that commitment. Well, ever. It's always got to go through Broomfield, ultimately.
Well, right. But they have a program, for that. They're Epic.
The grant, yes. But I'm talking about the long-term lease.
The lease.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to see their commitment to the lease, but I'd also like to see some alternative financing other than property taxes at this point to construct it. Yeah, for the capital, before we advance any money of our own towards this. Because, $100,000, a lot of money.
When is our next biannual survey?
Next summer, in the middle of the summer.
Yeah, it's usually
You start talking about it in February at the committee level and get the questions done.
I certainly would appreciate methodical research, and also the second point you made, which is getting people to understand the project. I don't think they know that we have a playground that's deficient. So both methodical research as well as involvement will be good things. The other side of the coin, however, is that I guess I'd like to see a play structure in place next summer, and I realize those are conflicting comments.
The thing is that if we go ahead and fund it like out of the 501c3, so and then the grant money won't. I don't think we can get grant money to reimburse. Right. I don't think, can we?
It's rare.
Yeah.
I've done it through USDA on projects like that, but yeah.
Maybe Epic would be.
Maybe.
I don't know.
When do you expect to know on those 2 grants?
Just, do you know the answer to that?
Epic Promise Grant, we hear by mid to end of December. I'm going to set up Amanda was wanting to have a meeting with Rick and I to go over what exactly we wanted out of the playground grant, because she's on the committee, so that she can then kind of talk on our behalf to the funding committee. So we'll get that going.
Well, then maybe, given that, then maybe the action items right now are to take the first steps to secure the longer-term lease. and to put all effort into the EPIC grant.
How much are we asking for in the EPIC grant?
That's just shy of 64,000, which would take care of the option 3 play structure, the purchase of that.
And in the promise grant, I wrote in that we'd be using the funds for a fundraiser, and so a fundraiser would be created to get people to come out and donate to this.
I mean, instead of waiting to do our biannual survey, couldn't we communicate through the newsletter this issue?
Well, I think
try to educate.
I think communicating for sure. Yes, absolutely.
We should probably be
getting
doing
feedback as to how important it is.
Right. It's not a big effort between Bob, Jess, and I to get a survey out.
It's no effort at all, and we need to know what the demand is and how. And if we want to reinforce getting a grant, having some data seems to me to be a useful idea.
Well, if it's no effort at all, quote unquote.
It's an hour's work, 1 hour.
Okay, thank you. I would support moving forward with that now. With the idea of, I mean, if we were doing it simplistically, we'd figure out the ADA requirements, yes or no. We'd pick one of those options, okay? We'd get the community's input and involvement. We'd raise the money, and we'd have a new play structure next summer. I also had some dialogue with Cheryl Stern, who's, of course, the leader behind our various summer festivals. And Cheryl emailed in a comment to you.
Yeah, I was going to wait till we get to public comment.
Okay.
Done. Yeah, I'll read that.
The other thing I just want to add in is, as I think through the playgrounds that I'm at, I can't think of any that don't have a list of private donors to the playground. And there's a number of them that we use that were only done through neighborhood fundraising, where the city provided the land and the operations, but the playground itself. Well, Glen Park is probably the only exception that I can think of, but the others all have lists. Sunset Playground has the list of donors, and so does Sharon Park and all the rest.
Yeah.
So that's kind of normal that's what happens.
So do you need action from us at this time?
I have one public comment to read.
Okay.
I don't know if we want to go to public comment now. Just the board's is good with that. So this is from Cheryl Stern. I am an avid supporter of the Kirkwood Community Playground. I support donating funds raised through the silent auction held during the Kirkwood Community Festival held in 2017, 2018, and 2019 for the board's consideration. Approximately $10,000 was raised in each of these years, and I support allocating the use of these funds towards the acquisition of new equipment for the playground. In addition to the chili cook-off, contributed $5,000 to KVFD in 2017, and the KCA sponsored the chili cook-off in 2018 and also contributed $5,000 in 2018. Perhaps these funds could also be attributed towards a playground equipment fund. I cannot support the use of funds from donations or for registration towards a playground, as the message in asking for these funds related specifically to the use of fire equipment needs. Note, too, that a portion of these funds included $18,000 to pay for seasonal firefighter during the busy winter months. It would be good to include an article in the newsletter that discusses the playground, the inspection results, and the actions the board has authorized to have the playground ready for the community during the summer months. As was pointed out in the planning meeting, timing is important so that the playground is available this summer.
So to clarify, she was suggesting that she would support using some of the money raised in the festivals, but not the monies that were discussed as going to the fire department?
Yes.
And that totals $30,000.
Yes, per her email. So what I can tell you is right now in the fire fund, we have $75,226.62 is the amount we have for purchase of fire equipment that's sitting between the 501c3 and the operational account. That's how much we have. The trailer-mounted compressor / scuba equipment to basically so we could fill our own scuba tanks and not have to go down to Woodford's, which Rick does out of the goodness of his heart, his own personal vehicle with, quite frankly, explosive tanks in. This would eliminate that, and that's about $51,000 for that piece of equipment, and that's what fire department is recommending that they would like, and we're going to take this up with operations at the next meeting. But it has been discussed a couple times. We just didn't have numbers, and now we have numbers.
So that's 24,000 unaccounted for.
Roughly, yes.
May I ask what county the playground's sitting in?
Alpine.
Maybe I suggest, have you gone up through Proposition 68 to see if you can get some funding through that?
No, we have not.
Because they're not, they called Amador County saying, hey, we have money for you if you want it, come get it.
Yeah, that's a multi-use parkland one. So I have put in the eligibility application for it, but they don't have the grant application yet. But yeah, they reached out to all cities, counties, special districts, and you had to fill the pre-app out. So yeah, we've done that.
Any other questions, comments?
Well, I have a proposal as a straw man, which is that you meet with Vail sooner rather than later. I thought we had a Vail representative to our finance committee, but he's not listed, doesn't show up. About two things. One is the land and the Epic Promise, with the idea of getting that resolved by the end of the year. So that would be point one. Point two would be to get a time frame for these other grants, and if they're are not able to reimburse us or they're too far out, then that's not practical. Three would be a community communication and survey effort. If we need to wait until the December newsletter, that's fine. But to get a survey out in terms of how important this is to the community and usage levels and ages. 4 would be based on that to, I guess I should say, resolve the ADA issue, because that's the $30,000, and I don't know if we need to spend that or not. And also pick a design. And then 5, come up with a short and sweet financing and fundraising proposal. And then 6 is to raise that money and purchase the structure and have it in place by the July 4th barbecue. That's the way I would go about it.
I have a question on your, I don't remember which number it was, but somewhere between 2 and 5. I think it'd be helpful to have some community permanent involvement in this. So in the survey, we could ask people who are interested in helping select a design. I think that would ensure some more participation. They tell their friends about it, and so on the grand opening, it feels more like not something that was done to people, but that they feel a sense of ownership.
I agree, and maybe it's as simple as including the various potential designs in the first staff memo.
As examples.
Right.
Yeah, and this could be an opportunity where the 5 and unders vote. I mean, you can do things out of this that will create a sense of pride once it's done, and not just, it showed up and somebody replaced it, and I wish there were more swings or something.
Any other comments on this?
I think that design issue is actually important for a number of reasons, and consideration should be looked. You should look at, can this withstand snow? Can we get a system that we don't have to remove every year, or at least partially not remove every year? Or if our complexity is to tear down and tear up everywhere. I mean, all these things need a little more thought, and I think that this is just proposal we got from one vendor. So, and also I think we should take the time to find financing as much as we can, and that still maybe have a minimum solution for the next summer, even if it's not a full. I wouldn't spend upfront the money because I think it's going to jeopardize our chance to get grant. If it's,
It's going to jeopardize what? I didn't understand you.
Say it again.
You just said you think it's going to jeopardize something. What's it going to
I
jeopardize?
think, yes, if you finance upfront, I'm concerned that we are less likely to. The need is addressed for the community, and I think the funding organization may not be as open to. Once we have a facility, there is less urgency for them to help us, in my opinion.
And Cheryl's volunteered to be on the ad hoc committee if we go that route, which I think we should. To help with the design selection and all that, the messaging.
So I don't see where we need a motion of any type. I think you have some marching orders here to get started on this. I think
General consensus.
Yeah, I think we have a general consensus along the lines of your 6 points. I think it was 6.
Can we ask Standish to volunteer to write up what the action plan could look like?
Sure. I mean,
Okay.
maybe we should have a playground committee. An ad hoc committee.
Yeah, we probably should.
And Standish, you seem like you're pretty interested in this. Or not.
Volunteering you.
The audit study, you have nothing
Everybody
to do.
step back one step from Standish.
Well, now this is it's a pretty simple list.
No, and I captured it, Standish. I don't think you need to write it.
Well, maybe we don't need to.
Well, one of us should write it up, and for the other to comment on it.
Okay.
Why don't you write it up?
Yeah, I already got it typed. I'll take care of it and get it to you. And maybe Ann would be willing to help.
I do think
There
I
we
do
go.
think the idea of an ad hoc committee
That's
that
it.
would actually review design and
Yeah.
help with the communication and all that is a very good idea.
And it gets the community involved in selecting what it's going to look like.
Well,
I'll tell you what,
As we put out this information, would anyone like to serve on this committee? Or we can
Yeah.
announce it in the paper. Okay, any other discussion on this item? Any comments?
Bob, I'd like to ask you to serve on the committee since you have so much involvement with playground.
Twice a week, yes. You have the playground expertise.
Well, I'll only do it if Ann's going to be on it too.
She said she would. So.
All right, then.
I prefer,
We're a team.
I prefer that your grandson.
Well, when I said I was going to ask them to choose, they got really excited. That's
Yeah.
why I think if the 12 and unders, if we had sort of a display during ski season in December, and they all came and they voted on it and gave their speeches on why whatever, that would be fun, and it would create a nice buzz.
Maybe Eric can design it.
Design the structure?
No, just the layout.
That cost us way too much.
Oh, I can design a structure, sure.
Yeah. No, I'm happy to help out, so that won't be a problem.
Okay, have we completed this item? I think we have. So with that, we'll move on to number 9, the general manager's report.
We received our Aqua JPIA inspection a few months ago, delayed obviously because of the fire and smoke in October, but that went well with our insurer. Some very minor comments. We have some more training coming up through them, and all in all, it went quite well. We had our Department of Drinking Water inspection. We have a new regulator, as well as a new superior to that regulator who came. So they found all sorts of new things that no one had found. I think it's a game they play to try and one-up their predecessors. And they did. So they found some things. We've corrected them. Nothing earth-shattering or major. So we're working on updating all those issues that they identified. We finished our RUS LAFAR, which is Loan Fund Accounting Review, which was overdue, but now they have staff, and so they're catching up on things, and we were the first to catch up. It was a terribly painful process for Kelly, especially because most of the stuff predated her, and the record keeping maybe wasn't the best, but she was able to get most everything that was needed to the auditor. There was one issue that was brought up. The district earned interest on some loan fund advances. Technically, we had to get approval to use that for construction, so what we are required to do is transfer $16,109.61 back to the RUS construction account, which we still have open, which is good. Then we can request the distribution of the C8 loan of that exact same amount. It's a shuffle of paperwork, but it makes RUS happy, and we're happy to do it. So we're in the process of that. It will be coming before finance. This came in after our finance meeting, so this will be coming before finance for blessing. We have 60 days to do it, so it should not be an issue to put it on the finance meeting in December. So all in all, he complimented Kelly on being able to get everything. She really was pulling out her hair, so she really deserves a big kudos for this. But all in all, it went well. So, any questions? Okay.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I have another question later.
Oh, okay. And then on the 218 rate study, that is underway. We've been giving documents to the consultant on that. Kelly's been helping out as best we can, and he's working on it right now, and we're trying to resolve the EDU issue to facilitate him being able to complete his study. So we're working on that, how we calculate EDUs, and if we want to change our methodology. So we are a one-off. No one does it the way we do it, so we're very unique. So, and that's where that stands. Yeah, you had a question, Standish?
Rick, are you going to cover solid waste contract expiration, or are you going to cover it, or are we not going to cover it? Because we talked about it at finance.
We did talk about it, and I didn't have it on it, but
issue.
I can add it to my report just because it's not a bullet doesn't mean I can't talk about it. So, yeah, it is a significant issue. And basically, our contract with ACES expires in December 31st, 2019. They have indicated they do not want to renew that contract. The only way they would consider it is if they got the whole valley. Right now, we have a voluntary solid waste process, and anyone can opt out that's currently a customer with 90 days' notice. We do have the ability, it was considered in 2001, for the board to adopt a mandatory solid waste process. And we discussed this at operations quite a bit. Direction there was to reach out to ACES and confirm that they really would be interested in continuing if we did the mandatory process. Initial discussions indicate that, yes, they would want to continue serving us, but they would want it to be the whole valley, which is a mandatory requirement. So right now, Vail uses South Tahoe Refuge. We received a bid from them when ACES told us in October that they didn't wish to continue. It's 3.3 times what we currently pay. That's significant. So we would have to do a rate adjustment, et cetera. We did look at other options if we did go with South Tahoe at the Operations Committee, which included only having the refuse station, letting the HOAs just contract with South Tahoe independently. Most of our labor is in the multi-unit condominium complexes. That's where the bulk of our labor is. Transfer station would significantly reduce the cost of the district. So we talked about that. We talked about the need to raise rates. Since it's a voluntary service, we don't have to go through a 218 process, but the district historically has, even though it's not required. So if we stay voluntary, we could raise the rates 3.3 times, and people can always opt out. But it's a significant change in cost for us. So Rick and I are running to ground the reality of whether ACES will do that, and we'll be bringing back what a mandatory ordinance would look like, and to operations, and going through that process of which way do we want to go, or which way does operations want to recommend to the board.
Wait a minute. Contract expires with Southlake?
It expires about a year after ours, is my understanding. A year from December.
I just want to make sure I heard you correctly. So we have no contract after the end of this year?
Correct, but ACES has said they would not leave us high and dry while we work through the process of either going to South Tahoe or going through the mandatory ordinance.
So they'll give us a short-term extension?
Yes.
At a known price?
They indicated they would just continue the contract as is without any increase. But I mean, they're not going to infinitely go on. They would want to see some movement, I would imagine.
You know why they said this?
They're losing money. They're recycling. They used to make money on recycling, and it now costs them $160 a ton to dispose of it. Amador County just went through this, and I watched the entire board meeting presentation on it because it's relevant to us because this issue had come up. And Jim McCargue, which is he handles solid waste for Environmental Health Department.
Resigned.
Oh no! Wow, that's too bad. He's a great guy. But anyway, he was saying that it's very costly. Recycling it costs them money to recycle now. So they've had to go around the horn quite a few times last year. They had to go, obviously go up 50. That they lose money on that. One other thing the operations committee talked about was perhaps extending them in the contract X amount of days that we assume that they're going to have to go around the long way and compensate them for them somehow on the rates. Built that into the rates in addition. So.
Just a correction. I think we considered this at the Finance Committee.
I'm sorry,
You said
you're right.
operations.
I apologize.
It was operations
I think
about it too.
I think we talked about it both,
we did.
possibly. I didn't have the numbers in operations, though,
Okay.
Standish. I think we just knew it was coming. But maybe not.
I don't see it on the agenda.
That was when you were answering a phone call towards the end of the
Oh, yeah, you
meeting,
dropped
probably.
off.
That's why you
Yeah.
probably don't remember it.
Okay.
Remember that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we did talk about it briefly.
Yeah, because Zace has indicated a fee they might find acceptable if they were to continue.
No, they have not. But I would remind the board that in 2017 they proposed to extend the contract for 5 years at their current rate structure and current CPI index adjustment, which would have kept us basically at our current rates plus or minus, or not minus, plus 3 to 5% per year in CPI.
Hindsight.
So you'll be coming back with a recommendation or committee recommendations?
Yeah, we're going to continue working through this so we actually have a real game plan. But the first thing was to find out if ACES had really had stomach for it to continue. If they don't, then we have to go with South Tahoe. There is no other provider that will come here or who is able to come here.
So the key is getting bail.
Well, if we do a mandatory ordinance, it becomes moot. If you're in the valley, you have to use service through us. It's an enterprise fund. It's just like water. It's Vail couldn't, or like the electricity. Vail's committed through they have to get electricity through the district. It's an enterprise fund. You don't get. It's not like snow removal. You don't get opt out if we go that route. But that's
There
a
was
policy
period
decision.
when we did the whole valley, and then the ski resort opted out. I don't know if you recall it.
I recall it.
Maybe 10, 15 years ago.
A long time ago.
Yeah.
2014, they said they were going to come back with us, and then they, Casey, just signed the contract after they made promises they were going to work with us, the district, with Michael at that time. But yeah, 95 through 98, it was all together. 98 is when they peeled off.
Yeah.
I think the problem you're going to get with Vail is that they're already dealing with one vendor through Heavenly.
Right. Exactly.
And I think that's why Casey went with them, actually. I'm just guessing, but
I would think your speculation is quite correct.
The other issue that this presents is that our sludge bin that we currently are hauling in California, to California, would possibly go to Nevada and go to Bentley, and that hasn't been figured out, and it'd be hauled by a third party, so it becomes pretty complicated on that side as well.
because there's extra demands with the sludge bin. That's a whole other issue.
Yeah. The and I want to keep the issues a little separate because that's a wastewater function. It's not the solid waste function ostensibly. We're lucky because ACES does it for us.
Right.
But it's really a wastewater department issue to resolve, and I'll be asking the wastewater supervisor if ACES pulls out, he'll need to figure out how we're going to get it hauled, and we'll be bringing that back.
So all this will continue.
Yes, but I definitely would welcome any thoughts from the board of general consensus of is there stomach for mandatory, is there not? Because I don't want to waste time going down a path if there's no stomach for it.
I mean, for me, yeah. I mean, I definitely would not hesitate to go down that route as long as Vail isn't forced to break their contract. I mean,
They probably would be.
yeah, so if ACES would agree to do it until the end of their contract, and then the mandatory would take effect then, that's what I mean, to me, that would make sense.
Based on our meeting with ACES, I'd be very shocked if they were willing to do that.
Well, I mean, we may have to pay more. I mean, I make it so they're not losing money.
I would assume there's some savings to Vail if we were to include them in the ACE.
If you were only looking at our current ACES rates versus their STR rates, yes, but my guess is their STR rates are less than they would normally pay in Heavenly, and thus they don't care about Kirkwood because it's so de minimis relative to their Heavenly and North Shore halls. Because I don't know. In what business model does it make sense to pay 3.3 times, which is what they're currently...
Right.
And the rate that STR proposed to us is the rate they're charging Vail, which is actually a little bit less because Vail doesn't own the dumpsters. So it's the exact same. So they're paying 3.3 times what the district pays right now, what our customers pay right now.
So why wouldn't that be a cost savings if they went?
Because what does that do to them, Vail, or in Heavenly and North Star, if they don't use STR here? Does STR suddenly say, well, you don't get our good rate because maybe that's a cheaper rate than what they're normally charging in Heavenly, and they have significantly, 8 times the trash, let's say, generated there. So cost savings here doesn't offset the cost increase there, is my guess. Pure speculation, but I can't understand the reason someone would pay 3.3 times what they have to.
Right. Well, we have to do what's right for the community as a whole, not just for Vail. And I think that mandatory, if that's the way we're going to get solid waste service at a reasonable rate, then that's the way that is. But I wouldn't want to say, but you've got to, violate your contract or break your contract. So, and if we can, give something else to ACES so that they would be okay with going for another year and then competing for that contract.
Okay.
I'm with Eric. I have the stomach for a mandatory thing. I remember when, in 1998, when Let the Resort Go Its Own Way, I was just a customer that watched that movie happen. It was kind of the wrong thing.
And then there's the issue of poaching. If everybody's on this, where
Yeah.
I don't know.
There's no way to enforce
You can't
a
control it
voluntary
really.
compliance.
Yeah. So if we're all on the same vendor, it benefits. I think it would benefit the district and the homeowners, from what I've seen.
Which
But I really
is
didn't
another
see.
reason you need a live body from Vail to talk to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, good luck. Okay, Rick, we're on the operations report, I believe.
Yeah, presentation changed a little bit since I looked at it 2 days ago, but we'll work with it. So, as Brandy mentioned before with the PSPSs and the ground fault issues, this was actually the transformer by Red Cliffs Law, or the rec center, just north of the rec center where the elbow actually disconnected off the transformer. And I don't know if you can see it, kind of top left of the screen, you can see the smoldering fuse burnt area. And then moving on with her report, again, this is a photograph of the transformer that's behind the service center and our staff. Brandy at the wheel there, checking to see how far the fault was discovered. And of course, there's the transformer. This looks more familiar. Okay, so as you know, it was reported that the Chair 11 transformer was damaged last winter by Vail Resorts. When they're doing their snow removal operations, to the left of this pole right here is the transformer itself. They have to groom into the base of the chair where the lift shack is to allow the necessary clearance between the chair and the surface of the snow for loading. And the only way to do that is to actually bring a cat into that narrow area and back the cat up to pull the snow back out of that, essentially a pit. In the course of doing that last winter, they actually bent the fin on that transformer and caused a mineral oil leak, which we couldn't guarantee that would make it through the winter. So we're working with Vail to have them purchase a brand new transformer, and then our staff, of course, is installing it. Unfortunately, that transformer has not yet arrived, and so to ensure they have continued operations this winter, staff has actually replaced the transformer temporarily, and with a transformer that was used and replaced previously by Chair 10. And so just this week, our staff was able to set the old Chair 10 transformer into place in the area, and then as of yesterday, I think we've completed working with Vail to put the disconnect box back onto that transformer, and so they should be in good shape for this winter. Of course, all these costs and associated costs will be billed to Vail.
And you looked at material handling arm? Maybe point that
out. Yes. As the board is probably aware, we did purchase a new material handling arm on our loader, and this is the first time or our first opportunity that we were able to use it and not borrow Vail's 15-foot material loading arm, which is kind of hard to work with. But yeah, it was just great to see that in action, and Dave Waddle was very excited to see it on our piece of equipment. Further working with Vail is installing bollards around our transformer to help protect them throughout the mid-mountain slope area, as well as along Kirkwood Meadows Drive. And as you can see, we have 4 new transformer or vault bollards here on Loop Road. And so staff will continue to do this activity, but again, just trying to protect our equipment and keep people safe too.
And I will note also, Rick, that in some of the areas we now have an actual standard detail for our bollards, and we are going with much taller bollards in areas where, like Chair 11, for example. So we've increased their height to avoid the same situation, and we're going to in situations where it's warranted a 4 bollard standard, as you'll see out here on Loop Road. And that was where Vail arbitrarily widened the road, didn't tell us, right through the middle of our vault. And they were planning on parking people there, so we needed to protect all 4 sides of our vault there. That's why you see 4 bollards on that one.
Moving on, operations has continued to work on the collection system repair project. As you know, we replaced 10 manholes last summer with these pan-type manholes, and then this summer we've continued on and replaced actually 14. As Eric mentioned before, we are becoming experts at this, and of the 14, 9 of them were complete resealed the inside of the casing and the cone of the manhole, as well as adding and introducing a concrete lid cap around the pan-type manhole itself. This has been a really successful project, and staff has really gotten behind it because we can see the changes at the wastewater treatment plant with the I&I. And if you walk the meadow today, you are going to see existing. This is what it'll look like in the meadow now. We've kind of pulled staff off of removing the fiberboard around the concrete, and we've removed the stakes, but basically we will come back, clean this up, re-veg the area, but due to staff and timing, we're kind of holding off on doing that activity until we get some of the other important projects done, like the T1 line and other things. So just giving you a quick update on that, and appreciate staff's dedication to getting that done. Next, as we identified, go ahead, Matron.
I don't know if it's the proper time to ask this question, but it's related to the sewer work that's done. The PUD, KMPUD has put one of our homeowners in a quandary because they are under threat of fine for an unapproved road to go to their cabin. But actually, so he was in the process of revegetating, but that work that was done from Oakwood, there is a parking pad, and basically the PUD has used this as an access to several manhole or sewer, what do you call that. And I don't think the PUD has an easement in that area. And so I think we need to talk and communicate on when you actually trespass on private property. I think we need to have some kind of definition of what can be done and not.
Yeah, I want to be careful with that word, so I'm going to go ahead and rebut that right now. We don't trespass on any property. When a customer signs up for service, they agree to provide reasonable access to our facilities. That's a condition of service. I've gone through this with Shanahan. our district council. So we have the right to access our facilities if the person's a customer. If they're not a customer, we have no right to come on their property.
Well, actually, this is to service a manhole, so it's not his utilities. It's basically the.
He doesn't have sewer?
Say it again?
He doesn't have sewer service? No, maybe some don't. I don't know. Is it a blank parcel or is it a built parcel?
There are access that we could discuss through our common area. So what I'm saying is there is a road that KMA was trying to remove because it's unapproved, but the KMPUD keep using it, making revegetation impossible. And it is a private property, and the work was not for his own benefit. It was to actually access a meadow to do these several manholes. And there are other areas that could be used, and could discuss that. That's what I wanted to say. I think I'd like to have some coordination between KMA and the PUD, so we agree on how we can address this situation.
Yeah, I'd love to do that. That'd be great. Yeah, we do have a lot of easements through there too, so we'll look at it. Oh, okay. Can you provide me the final map? Because I don't have KMA's final maps. That's one thing I'm missing. I have all the Alpine side, but I have none of the Amador side.
We have the list of all the easements within KMA, including the KMPUD easement, and it's not showing up.
Okay.
Okay. Unless there's any other questions, as was identified, I think the newsletter was in September, for smoke testing. We did do some smoke testing this fall, and this is the Hawkwood area, and as you can see barely in this photograph, poor Spencer's in the middle of that, but basically we did receive the equipment to do smoke testing, and we're checking our collection system, and in the course of doing that, it does generate smoke coming out of certain manholes, and so again, where smoke comes out, obviously water can get in, so we've been working in the Hawkweed area, and we'll continue working primarily probably on the west side first, and then working our way around the valley. But great project. We identified 2 collection system manholes that were not actually mapped, but hidden. And we found 2, yeah. This is an example of ventilation coming in. And then finally, in the trees here is one of those manholes that we didn't know it was there. I mean, it was there forever, but so good project. We'll continue on that as staff time permits. And that concludes my operations report, unless there's any other questions.
I would mention the fact that we found 2 manholes has already paid for that smoke testing equipment in my mind.
Yeah.
Because now we can identify those manholes have potential leaks or things we didn't know about. Is it ones that need to be repaired under this other program we're doing? So it's definitely paid for itself. It was, I think, less than $2,500 for the smoke testing equipment.
I just want to say I'm amazed, Randy and the staff, the number of projects you guys have done. The scope of those projects this summer is amazing. Thank you.
We'll let staff know. Keep.
Okay, that's all for your report?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Rick. We'll move to item 11, standing committee reports, planning committee.
We met yesterday. We just find mine. Eric just gave us an overview of the EDU methodology and what his thinking is, and also the conversations he's had with other committees regarding EDU methodology. We've discussed the playground. We just had an overview of the proposed Kirkwood Station development, just to make sure people are aware. In particular, I asked Eric to review from a planning perspective the feasibility of taking infrastructure over there, servicing all this, providing all the services, and at least from a technical point of view, engineering point of view, Eric says this is about as good as it would get over there. So my concern is more financial, but I think from the TriTac meeting that followed, it seems like the developer is quite aware of the financial issues, so that's good. That was it.
Bob, IT?
Well, there's 2 items. One is we worked on our records retention policy, which was basically looking at what other organizations do, and then establishing criteria, minimum criteria for retaining records. So that's, we reviewed a draft, but that's in the process of being finalized. We also discussed security and password protection. And then the other thing we talked about was we had a lot of issues this summer with the reliability of the census data for the purposes not of billing, but for customer access. And so in a heated discussion, we actually got enough energy on it, so that's actually fixed. But we do have an issue that most customers aren't aware of. On an hourly basis, census reports how much activity happened in that hour, but the collection of that is not completely reliable. So we will miss things. For example, if you get buried in snow, it might not make it through. If it doesn't make it through in 24 hours, it won't be recorded. But that's not how we bill. We bill by measuring the meter read at the beginning and ending of the month. So someone looking online would see a lower number. Best case, they would see the same number. Typical case, they would see a lower number. So we've discussed ways that we wanted to clarify that. I also wanted to bring up a proposal for when we consider the committees for next year. It's been hard to get community volunteers for the IT committee, and our best volunteer is not renewing. I'd like to suggest that we reconsider that committee and maybe think of it as a combination communications and IT. Because I think one of the things we've seen in the last year is there's probably more we can be doing on community communications and having some active participation, community members looking at the website, suggesting improvements in that. That could be much more valuable than a committee with no community participation. So I'd like to suggest that we consider maybe changing the charter of that committee for this next coming year.
IT.
Yeah, just make it communications.
There once
and
upon a
IT.
time was a communications committee, which
Yes.
we then split between planning and IT. Planning was only the survey, but really you were doing that. So, I mean, it makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, during the bad snow year, we eliminated the communications committee as a cost savings measure.
Yeah.
I remember proposing that.
Very good. Peter, ops
I think we covered everything, don't you, Standish?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
and finance?
I think we covered everything.
I think so.
Okay. Personnel committee, we met on October 3rd, where we reviewed staff training and continuing education and some upcoming conferences that might be appropriate for staff and for directors. Also, there were 2 meetings of the core group of the Economic Development Committee. This is not a committee of this board, but is a committee of all the major players in the Valley. And on September 25th, under the new leadership of Bruce Ginanola, we had our first productive meeting, I would say, really productive. And that group defined some preliminary statements for a vision, and one is a long-term vision defining how to assure continued economic growth for the Valley, i.e. new revenue from increased visitation and addition of new products, services, and activities. And a more short-term one is consider what and when to add incremental Valley offerings that will improve the quality of life for resident and guests and visitors. More as a project, an upcoming project, I think there was a consensus of the committee to explore what's called a net promoter survey, and that's a survey to gauge basically user impression of products, services, and activities to see if they are what you would consider a promoter of those, where they would recommend to their friends and everything, come to Kirkwood. And you need a rather high rating on a scale of 1 to 10 to be of in the promoter category. And then contrary to that are those things that don't rate very highly that we need to work on, which are detractors. People see them as deficits of the community. So there's discussion about how to pursue that, whether it's best to do one community survey or have different groups do their own surveys. And I think it was generally decided that having one community survey would be too cumbersome. There's just too much to include with all the different parties. So again, these are some things we're working on. They had a second meeting, October 16th, where they had further discussion on the Net Promoter Survey. And KMR actually does a Net Promoter Survey now, but it's unlikely that they're going to share their results with us. So we'll have to start from scratch on that. So the objective of that committee is to meet almost monthly now, and there'll be another meeting scheduled in December. So we're making progress, which is good. I think Bruce's leadership has really paid off in this. So that's my report on that. And then we have temporary advisory committees. I don't think we have any in motion right now, but I do have an ad hoc committee that I would like to appoint, and this is for review of the general manager's contract, and this is in preparation for anticipated renewal in June when the contract is up. And I would like to appoint Bob Epstein and Eric to be that committee for the review of the general manager's contract. It's early start on that, but as we know, as time goes on, it becomes a time pressure type of thing to get it done in time. So
your contract? What was your contract?
It was 3. Well, it was 2 and 7/8.
Yeah, it was slightly.
Because we started in
It started
September.
October, so it's a little less than 3 years.
Oh, it goes fast. Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
So I thank you for serving on that ad hoc committee. And from there, we'll open it to general discussion of board members if they have any questions on anything.
Don't we have an ad hoc committee on
Well, yeah,
fire?
yeah, it's become, I think, a subcommittee of the finance. But yeah, just real briefly, we've brought Standish into the process, and we continue to explore alternatives, any alternative possible to avoid a special tax for fire. I know that Rick and Eric will have a meeting with Alpine County about their latest costs I think on the 12th. But we continue to explore alternatives. We really don't want the tax.
Good. There's no other business to bring forward. We have a special, next board meeting will be Friday, December 13th, 1 o'clock. Special date?
Lucky. Good luck.
Is there a holiday event afterwards?
Yes, there is. Jess is working on that. I believe it's secured now. It'll.
And the morning is a powder day.
Looks that way.
With that, the meeting's adjourned right
Is there a
after
closed
11.
session or not?
Pardon?
Is there a closed session or not?
We haven't announced any, no. No closed session.